shows up at this event. I do think, though, that, you know, from everything that I've heard over the last several months, they have been in communication pretty regularly over this period of time. They do talk, and even though they haven't been seeing each other physically, they've been keeping that relationship up, and I do think you're going to see some genuine warmth between the two of them when they come out here today.
And we hope to see them very soon, Dana. But that really, you know, is the question, can they still gin up that excitement, that momentum that these rollouts are supposed to generate? But at the same time, it is still a striking visual. Kamala Harris is the first black vice presidential nominee and the first South Asian vice presidential nominee. This is history in the making.
Oh, absolutely. There's no question about it. And as we talked about, they are already using social media to continue to gin things up. I mean, just as Abby was talking about Senator Harris's husband tweeting out behind-the-scenes pictures, I was looking at them. You can be sure that some of those are going to go viral. And he's a tweeter, so this isn't new, but it's certainly going to be a big benefit to this campaign as they try to keep sort of the energy going.
And we just saw those pictures, Dana. You probably saw it too.
Yes, exactly. I was just
there, and we know that I think most people are here. We were expecting spouses to be at the events tonight, so waiting on word from inside on what exactly the holdup is, but it's certainly going to be interesting to see Harris and Biden together. A lot of people here, a little crowd, you know, trying to get a glimpse of the ticket and get a sense of their chemistry. I mean, the last time we saw these two together was on the stage during the first Democratic debate. They had a bristly exchange, and it brings you back to that, you know, memory that Chris Dodd, former senator on the VP vetting committee, brought up that, you know, are there going to be questions about Harris's loyalty to Biden after they had that exchange? What's their relationship going to be like? Is she going to
bastion? California in years gone by was the place that produced Republican presidents and delivered for Republican presidents, but the west of the United States has become Democratic territory, and the Democratic Party has become much more the nation's northern.
The party has been too tolerant of extremism under President Trump. QAnon, they note a wide-ranging conspiracy theory alleging a deep state plot.
Each other at real job.
Okay.
Where did you go?
I was at my mom's house, but she did not. From Doug Emhoff, who is Kamala Harris's husband, tweeted that cell phone.
Candidate, it came out over social media and email yesterday, a socially distanced event in Delaware today. Joe Biden has spent most of his time during this campaign in and around Delaware, in and around his home because of the coronavirus crisis. I want to go to Mary Bruce, who's on the scene there, and we've got this mix of tradition and something brand new, Mary.
George, this is just a surreal and very bizarre scene. To think that normally they would be unveiling this historic ticket at a massive campaign rally. Instead, in just moments, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will step before the cameras and make history before what is essentially a barely empty high school gym. They will be speaking to just a few dozen reporters, members of the press, and their staff who are sitting in those socially distanced circles. There will be no massive cheering, no big applause. And here outside of the building, we are seeing quite a contrast. Out here, there are about 200 supporters who have been out here for hours, some braving the rain just to get a glimpse of this ticket. Most we've talked to actually really waiting just to get a glimpse of Kamala Harris. It is a remarkable turn of events. It reminds me that it has been nearly 5 months since we've actually seen anything like this, since Joe Biden held his last campaign rally. That was actually an event where he was joined by Kamala Harris. And at that rally, Joe Biden said that he views his role going forward as being a bridge to the next generation of leadership. And what a powerful message he is sending in choosing Kamala Harris to help lead that next generation. A woman that we spoke to here said that it took her breath away when she heard this announcement, saying that it showed that Joe Biden was listening to black women voters like her. She said it showed that in this divisive time that progress was still possible. In a word, she said it means there's hope. George.
And Rachel Scott, we actually, but let me go to the scene.
Hello. Thanks for being here. I wish we were able to talk to the folks outside, but we're keeping our social distancing and playing by the rules. Good afternoon, everyone. To me and to Kamala, this is an exciting day. It's a great day for our campaign, and it's a great day for America, in my view. Over the past several weeks, I've had the incredible privilege of meeting and spending a good deal of time with a group of talented women leaders, all of whom are qualified to be president. With each one, the more I learned about them, the more I talked to them, the more impressed I was, even though I knew them before. I want to thank each and every one of them for being part of this process, and I look forward to working with them as we rebuild this country to get elected, and once we are elected, God willing. I approach this with a seriousness of purpose and of mind, because this is a serious moment for our nation. We're at one of those inflection points, you've heard me say that before in our history, a life-changing election for this nation. And the choice we make this November is going to decide the future of America for a very, very long time. And I had a great choice, great opportunities. I had a great choice, but I have no doubt that I picked the right person to join me as the next Vice President of the United States of America, and that's Senator Kamala Harris. You know, and it seems Americans all across this nation, at least at the outset here, agree with me. Yesterday we had our best grassroots fundraising day of the campaign, more than double our previous record, and in doing so we set a single-day record for online political fundraising, and I think I know why. So I hope that you'll join us as well, those of you who listen today. Go to joebiden.com today. $5, $10, whatever. Kamala, as you all know, is smart, she's tough, she's experienced, she's a proven fighter for the backbone of this country, the middle class, for all those who are struggling to get into the middle class. Kamala knows how to govern. She knows how to make the hard middle class. Kamala knows how to govern. She knows how to make the hard calls. She's ready to do this job on day one. And we're both ready to get to work rebuilding this nation and building it better. As Attorney General of the largest state in the country, Kamala took on the big banks over mortgage fraud and won. Took on big oil when it wanted to pollute without consequences. She was a pioneer in marriage equality and tackled the gun lobby. You know, we've all watched her in the United States Senate go toe-to-toe with Trump officials. An answer. And when none was forthcoming, it was obvious what the answer was. As a member of the Intelligence Committee and the Judiciary Committee, she's been the center in the middle of the most critical national security challenges our country faces. Well aware of all the threats to this nation and ready to respond to them. Our country faces. Well aware of all the threats to this nation and ready to respond to them. And as a child of immigrants, she knows personally how immigrant families enrich our country, as well as the challenges of what it means to grow up Black and Indian American in the United States of America. Her story is American, and she has earned each and every of the accolades and achievements that she has gained, many of them often in the face of obstacles that others put in her way, but never quit. And this morning, all across the nation, little girls woke up, especially little Black and brown girls, who so often feel overlooked and undervalued in their communities. But today, just maybe, they're seeing themselves for the first time in a new way as the stuff of president and vice presidents. In her campaign in the primary, Kamala often talked about what she referred to as the 3 a.m. agenda, about moms and dads awake late at night in their kitchens, worried, scared, uncertain about how they were going to take care of their families, about how they were going to pay the bills, about how they were going to make it, simply make it. Growing up in Scranton and Claymont, Delaware, I saw that struggle with my family as well. Kamala saw with hers as well. And millions of Americans are living that struggle as we speak, especially in this moment of crisis, especially with so many jobs lost. Kamala and I both know that all folks are looking for, as my dad would say, is an even shot. Just give me a shot, a fair shot, a shot at making it. And fair shot, a shot at making it. And it'll be the work of our administration to make sure they get a fair shot. Working families need someone on their side in this nation because they certainly don't have anyone in the president now on their side. That's going to change in the Biden-Harris administration. It's going to be gratifying to see the strong, enthusiastic reaction to Senator Harris as our next vice president. You know, it comes from people all over the country. It's already occurring all over the country. All ideological views, all backgrounds. Events, of course, we are predictable, some of them. It comes from all over, except, of course, from Donald Trump's White House and his allies. You all knew it was coming. You could have set your watches to it. Donald Trump has already started his attacks, calling Kamala, quote, nasty, whining about how she is, quote, mean to his appointees. It's no surprise, because whining is what Donald Trump does best, better than any president in American history. Is anyone surprised Donald Trump has a problem with a strong woman or strong women across the board? We know that more is to come. Well, let's be clear. If you're a working person, worried about whether or not you'll have a job to go to, whether or not you'll be able to pay your mortgage, pay your rent, worried about the poison in the air you breathe, the water you drink, worried about your civil rights, even your basic right to dignity, which is under attack with this administration. Kamala Harris has had your back, and now we have to have her back. She's going to stand with me in this campaign, and all of us are going to stand up for her. On January 20th, 2021, we're all going to watch Senator Harris raise her right hand and swear the oath of office as the first woman ever to serve in the second highest office in America, in this land. And then we're going to get to work fixing the mess that President Trump and Vice President Pence have created, both at home and abroad, through 4 years of mismanagement and coddling of terrorists and thugs around the world. Not only will America dig itself out of this hole they put us in, we're going to build back, and we're going to build back better. We have a public health crisis. While he's in court trying to do away with health care, with more than 5 million reported infections, 165,000 people dead and climbing as a consequence of COVID-19. And still, months later, no real leadership or plan from the President of the United States how to get this pandemic under control. No real help for the states and local governments trying to fill the vacuum of leadership from the White House. No real help for children and educators, for small businesses and frontline workers that they're ones holding our country together. Instead, he's issuing executive orders and making promises that in the end will defund the Social Security system while insisting that this virus will disappear. The Joe Biden and Kamala Harris administration will have a comprehensive plan to meet the challenge of COVID-19 and turn the corner on this pandemic. Masking, clear science-based guidance, dramatically scaling up testing, getting states and local governments the resources they need to open the schools and businesses safely. We can do this. We just need a president and a vice president willing to lead and take responsibility. Not as this president says, it's not my fault. The governor should thank me more. As the old saying goes, give me a break. We have an economic crisis with more than 16 million Americans. 16 million still out of work. Down the record. On track to leave office with the worst jobs record of any American president in modern history. But instead of doing the hard work of meeting face to face with congressional leaders, Democrats and Republicans in the White House, like every other president has done in a crisis, to get Americans the relief they need and deserve, Donald Trump is on the golf course. If I told you this 3 years ago, you'd look at me like I was being crazy. He hasn't even met with the leadership. He doesn't have time, it appears. We have a climate crisis that Donald Trump refuses to even acknowledge. When he thinks about climate change, all we hear is the word hoax. The Biden-Harris administration is going to meet the climate crisis, protect the health of the American public. And along the way, we're going to deliver one word: jobs. Good paying jobs. We have a racial justice crisis. Donald Trump seeks only to inflame it with his politics of racist rhetoric and appeals to division. You know, today is not only the day I'm proud to introduce Senator Kamala Harris as the vice presidential nominee of the Democratic Party. It's also the 3rd anniversary of that terrible day in Charlottesville. Remember what it felt like to see those neo-Nazis, close your eyes, and those Klansmen, white supremacists, coming out of fields, carrying lighted torches, faces contorted, bulging, veins, pouring into the streets of historic American city, spewing the same anti-Semitic bile we heard in Hitler's Germany in the 30s. Remember how it felt to see a violent clash ensue between those celebrating hate and those standing against it? For me, it was a call to action. My father used to say, silence is complicity, not original to him, but he believed it. At that moment, I knew I couldn't stand by and let Donald Trump, a man who went on to say, when asked about what he thought, he said there were very fine people on both sides. Quote, very fine people on both sides. No president of the United States of America has ever said anything like that. See him continue to attack everything that makes America, America. I knew we were in the battle for the soul of the nation. That's when I decided to run. And I'm proud now to have Senator Harris at my side in that battle because she shares with the same intensity I do.
Discuss their shared vision for how to win.
At my side in that battle because she shares with the same intensity I do. For she's someone who knows what's at stake. The question is, for all Americans to answer, who are we as a nation? What do we stand for? And most importantly, what do we want to be? You know, someone who knows that the future of this country is limited only by the barriers we place on our own imaginations, because there's nothing Americans cannot achieve when we put our minds to it, when we do it together. One of the reasons I chose Kamala is because we both believe that we can define America simply in one word: possibilities. Possibilities. Let me say it again. Possibilities. That's America. That's what sets this nation apart. Is that everyone, the ability for everyone, and we mean everyone, to go as far and dream as big as hard work and their God-given ability will take them. When I agreed to serve as President Obama's running mate, he asked me a number of questions, as I've asked Kamala. But the most important was, he said to me, he asked me what I wanted, most importantly. I told him I wanted to be the last person in the room before he made important decisions. That's what I asked Kamala. I asked Kamala to be the last voice in the room, to always tell me the truth, which she will. Challenge my assumptions if she disagrees. Ask the hard questions. Because that's the way we make the best decisions for the American people. I got a chance to spend some time at my home today with Kamala and Doug. And I want to thank them, and I thank them publicly for agreeing to join and take this journey with Jill and me. Doug, you're going to have to learn what it means to be a barrier breaker yourself in this job you're about to take on. America's first second gentleman. And although they're not with us here today, I want to thank Ellen Cole as well. I had a chance to speak to Doug's mom and dad and to Ellen Cole. And we're going to get our kids together to let them know what's coming. My grandchildren are about the age of their children. I got to speak to them. My campaign has always been a family affair, every campaign I've run. So I've got some news for you. You're all honorary Bidens. And here's the best part. Kamala, you've been an honorary Biden for quite some time. You know, I came first to know who Kamala was through our son, Beau Biden. They were friends. They served as attorneys general at the same time. They took on the same big fights together. Kamala in California, Beau here in Delaware. Big fights that helped change the entire country. I know how much Beau respected Kamala and her work. And that mattered a lot to me, to be honest with you, as I made this decision. So now, we need to get to work, pulling this nation out of these crises we find ourselves in, getting our economy back on track. Now let me introduce to you, for the first time, your next Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris. Kamala, the floor is yours.
Here you go. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Joe. As I said, Joe, when you called me, I am incredibly honored by this responsibility, and I'm ready to get to work. I am ready to get to work. After the most competitive primary in history, the country received a resounding message that Joe was the person to lead us forward. And Joe, I'm so proud to stand with you. And I do so mindful of all the heroic and ambitious women before me, whose sacrifice, determination, and resilience makes my presence here today even possible. This is a moment of real consequence for America. Everything we care about, our economy, our health, our children, the kind of country we live in, it's all on the line. We're reeling from the worst public health crisis in a century. The president's mismanagement of the pandemic has plunged us into the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. And we're experiencing a moral reckoning with racism and systemic injustice that has brought a new coalition of conscience to the streets of our country, demanding change. America is crying out for leadership. Who cares more about himself than the people who elected him. A president who is making every challenge we face even more difficult to solve. But here's the good news. We don't have to accept the failed government of Donald Trump and Mike Pence. In just 83 days, we have a chance to choose a better future for our country. So, Joe, Dr. Biden, thank you for the trust you've placed in me. Jill, I know you will be an incredible First Lady. Trust you've placed in me. Jill, I know you will be an incredible First Lady. And my husband Doug and I are so grateful to become a part of your extended family. And ever since I received Joe's call, I've been thinking, yes, about the first Biden that I really came to know, and that, of course, is Joe's beloved son, one of his beloved sons, Beau. In the midst of the Great Recession, Beau and I spoke on the phone practically every day, sometimes multiple times a day, working together to win back billions of dollars for homeowners from the big banks of the nation that were foreclosing on people's homes. And let me just tell you about Beau Biden. I learned quickly that Beau was the kind of guy who inspired people to be a better version of themselves. He really was the best of us. And when I would ask him, where'd you get that? Where did this come from? He'd always talk about his dad. And I will tell you, the love that they shared was incredible to watch. It was the most beautiful display of the love between a father and a son. And Beau talked about how Joe would spend 4 hours every day riding the rails back and forth from Wilmington to Washington so he could make breakfast for his kids in the morning and make it home in time to tuck them in bed each night. All of this so 2 little boys who had just lost their mom and their sister in a tragic accident would know that the world was still turning. And that's how I came to know Joe. He's someone whose first response when things get tough is never to think about himself, but to care for everyone else. He's someone who never asks, why is this happening to me? And instead asks, what can I do to make life better for you? And Joe and I, yes, we are cut from the same cloth. Family is everything to me too. And I cannot wait for America to get to know my husband Doug and our amazing kids Cole and Ella. Because whether I'm cheering in the bleachers at a swim meet, or setting up a college room dorm, or helping my goddaughter prepare for her school debate, or building Legos with my godson, or hugging my 2 baby nieces, or cooking dinner, Sunday dinner, my family means everything to me. And I've had a lot of titles over my career, and certainly Vice President will be great. But Kamala will always be the one that means the most. And you know, my mother and father, they came from opposite sides of the world to arrive in America. One from India and the other from Jamaica, in search of a world-class education. But what brought them together was the civil rights movement of the 1960s. And that's how they met, as students in the streets of Oakland, marching and shouting for this thing called justice, in a struggle that continues today. My parents would bring me to protests strapped tightly in my stroller. And my mother, Shamala, raised my sister Maya and me to believe that it was up to us and every generation of Americans to keep on marching. She'd tell us, don't sit around and complain about things, do something. So I did something. I devoted my life to making real the words, carved in the United States Supreme Court, equal justice under law. And 30 years ago, I stood before a judge for the first time, breathed deep, and uttered the phrase that would truly guide my career and the rest of my career. Kamala Harris for the people. The people. That's who I represented as district attorney, fighting on behalf of victims who needed help. The people. That's who I fought for as California's Attorney General when I took on transnational criminal organizations who traffic in guns and drugs and human beings. And it's the people who I have fought for as a United States Senator, where I've worked every day to hold Trump officials accountable to the American people. And let me tell you, as somebody who has presented my fair share of arguments in court, the case against Donald Trump and Mike Pence is open and shut. Just look where they've gotten us. More than 16 million out of work. Millions of kids who cannot go back to school. A crisis of poverty, of homelessness, afflicting Black, brown, and indigenous people the most. A crisis of hunger, afflicting 1 in 5 mothers. A crisis of hunger, afflicting 1 in 5 mothers who have children that are hungry. And tragically, more than 165,000 lives that have been cut short. Many with loved ones who never got the chance to say goodbye. It didn't have to be this way. 6 years ago, in fact, we had a different health crisis. It was called Ebola. And we all remember that pandemic. But you know what happened then? Barack Obama and Joe Biden did their job. Only 2 people in the United States died. 2. That is what's called leadership. But compare that to the moment we find ourselves in now. When other countries are following the science, Trump pushed miracle cures he saw on Fox News. While other countries were flattening the curve, he said the virus would just, poof, go away. Quote, like a miracle. The virus has impacted almost every country. But there's a reason it has hit America worse than any other advanced nation. It's because of Trump's failure to take it seriously from the start. His refusal to get testing up and running. His flip-flopping on social distancing and wearing masks. His delusional belief that he knows better than the experts. All of that is reason. And the reason that an American dies of COVID-19 every 80 seconds. It's why countless businesses have had to shut their doors for good. It's why there is complete chaos over when and how to reopen our schools. Mothers and fathers are confused and uncertain and angry about childcare and the safety of their kids at school, whether they'll be in danger if they go or fall behind if they don't. Trump is also the reason millions of Americans are now unemployed. He inherited the longest economic expansion in history from Barack Obama and Joe Biden. And then, like everything else he inherited, he ran it straight into the ground. Because of Trump's failures of leadership, our economy has taken one of the biggest hits out of all the major industrialized nations, with an unemployment rate that has tripled as of today. Nations with an unemployment rate that has tripled as of today. This is what happens when we elect a guy who just isn't up for the job. Our country ends up in tatters, and so does our reputation around the world. But let's be clear, This election isn't just about defeating Donald Trump or Mike Pence. It's about building this country back better. And that's exactly what Joe and I will do. We'll create millions of jobs and fight climate change through a clean energy revolution. Bring back critical supply chains so the future is made in America. Build on the Affordable Care Act so everyone has the peace of mind that comes with health insurance. And finally, offer caregivers the dignity, the respect, and the pay they deserve. We'll protect a woman's right to make her own decisions about her own body, root out systemic racism in our justice system, and pass a new Voting Rights Act, a John Lewis Voting Rights Act, that will ensure every voice is heard and every voice is counted. The civil rights struggle is nothing new to Joe. It's why he got into public service. It's why he helped reauthorize the Voting Rights Act and restore unemployment discrimination and employment discrimination laws. And today, he takes his place in the ongoing story of America's march toward equality and justice as the only who has served alongside the first black president and has chosen the first black woman as his running mate. But as Joe always points out, this election is about more than politics. It's about who we are as a country. And I'll admit, over the past 4 years, there have been moments when I have truly worried about our future. But whenever I think that there is a reason for doubt, whenever I've had my own doubts, I think of you, the American people, the doctors and nurses and frontline workers who are risking your lives to save others, the truck drivers and the workers in grocery stores, in factories, in farms, working there, putting your own safety on the line to help us get through this pandemic, the women and students taking to the streets in unprecedented numbers, the dreamers and immigrants who know that families belong together, the LGBTQ Americans who know that love is love, people of every age and color and creed who are finally declaring in one voice that yes, Black Lives Matter. All across this country, a whole new generation of children is growing up hearing the cries for justice and the chants of hope on which I was raised, some strapped into strollers of their own. And trust me, it's a song you'll never forget. So to everyone keeping up the fight, you are doing something. You are doing something great. You are the heroes of our time. And you are the reason I know we are going to bring our country closer to realizing its great promise. But to do it, we'll need to work, organize, and vote like never before, because we need more than a victory on November 3rd. We need a mandate that proves that the past few years do not represent who we are or who we aspire to be. Joe likes to say that character is on the ballot, and it's true. When he saw what happened in Charlottesville 3 years ago today, he knew we were in a battle for the soul of our nation. And together with your help, that's a battle we will win. Earlier this year, I said I'd do whatever Joe asked me to do. And so now I'm asking you to do the same. So visit joebiden.com to get involved in this campaign and vote. Because electing Joe Biden is just the start of work ahead of us. And I couldn't be prouder to be by his side, running to represent you, the people. Thank you, and may God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
Well, there you have it. In some ways, this felt like also the messaging kickoff for the general election, if you will, with Biden and Harris there. It is, oh, here we go. Let's at least look at this moment here for a second. There are the two spouses, Joe Biden
And there they are together with their spouses, waving at a kind of an empty gym, but it is obviously a time of a pandemic, so we have social distancing in place.
Say black and brown girls will see themselves differently. There's no question that black and brown women across the country have been giddy with excitement since this announcement came along last night. My phone was blowing up with messages from the room.
Yeah, I mean, given the situation, it could have been a lot more awkward. I mean, these were two extremely strong, pointed speeches from the presumptive nominees of the Democratic Party, and it.
We will continue to bring you the latest on all things politics as we stand some 82 days out from this election on our 24-hour streaming network, CBSN. You can watch it at cbsnews.com or on.
Which ended, that candidacy, of course, ended before anybody even took a vote during the primary season. But she talked about, she used her initial catchphrase saying Kamala Harris for the people. She talked about, of course, her personal story, which is remarkable that she
election, and also about the speech tonight by the former vice president.
A little bit delayed in getting started because there's been terrible storms on the East Coast and the power went out where they were going to have their event. It is different to have a rollout like this taking place in the middle of a pandemic. You saw they had to be separated. There was not a big hug between the two of them. But I think if you're the Biden campaign, you're pretty happy with how that went. Both speeches given on teleprompter. And I think the other thing that she said, in addition to all the points that you made, Jesse, is she talked about how this, if they were to win, it doesn't just need to be a win, it has to be a mandate. They're looking to try to see if they can figure out a way to not just win by a little bit. They want to be able to win so that they can figure out how to move forward on their agenda. I think that you also saw that, for a lot of Americans, this might be the first time they're actually ever listening to a speech by Kamala Harris. A lot of people don't, not every American pays attention during a Democratic primary, and she didn't even make it to the early states to get a chance to even be voted on the first time. She dropped out in December of 2019. So she has an opportunity here to have a second chance at making a first impression. And I think that you saw that the Democrats have really closed ranks all around. They have a staff all ready to go to be able to support her. I thought Sarah Palin's advice to her that she provided last night was really good, including the one of don't trust anybody new, right? Have your own team around you, because Sarah Palin still looks back at what happened to her in 2008 and thinks that that was one of the things that was just absolutely terrible that happened to her on that campaign. The last thing I would say is that I think you will see her out a little bit more. It is not sustainable to run for a campaign and to only do 1 or 2 events a week. She said it, there's 83 days left to go. So this is probably one of the best days that the Biden-Harris campaign will have. The rest might get a little bit messier from here.
I would agree with that. Greg, what did you think about Dana's point that, she is not a well-known politician the way you think of a Bernie Sanders, even Elizabeth Warren, a Hillary Clinton, a Joe Biden. What do you think she did for herself in today's speech?
Well, for one thing, she sold out the cops. So that was like the thing that really stood out to me, is that she sold out. She was a cop, but she's no longer a cop. The other thing, it is a two-way race in the sense that it's going to be about race and it's going to be about race. You saw Joe Biden trot out the fine people hoax, which has already been discredited. Trump wasn't talking about racists. He was talking about both sides of the statue debate. Anybody with half a brain, i.e. Joe, knows that. So he mentions the Klan. This from a guy who spoke at a funeral for a Klansman. Okay? Trump didn't speak at a funeral for a Klansman. Joe Biden did, but I guess we forgot about that. Then he said something totally mind-boggling that said that Trump coddled terrorists. And I'm thinking, I go like, okay, this is from a guy who was against taking out bin Laden. And Trump got rid of ISIS, Soleimani, and al-Baghdadi. So is he losing his mind, or is he just flat out lying? Lastly, and this is why I hate politics, and politics is BS, because it shows you how awful people can be. I've heard the Kamala Biden story and about the strong connection between Kamala and Beau, but I wonder if she knew so much and learned so much about Joe's character through this close relationship with Beau Biden, why did she say she believed the sex abuse accusers of Joe Biden? And why did she smear him as a racist sympathizer with segregationists if she had learned so much from Beau Biden? And it's probably because she's just lying. And if
presidential ticket, it's the vice presidential nominee who talks about, let's have the presidential nominees back. They're supposed to be the supporting player. But when you think back to this primary and why Joe Biden won the nomination, it's because of that support that remained constant and grew, of course, over time among African-American voters. And when I would be on the campaign trail following Joe Biden in the primaries and ask black voters why they continued to support Joe Biden, despite even having African-American candidates in the race, one of the most common answers was he had Barack Obama's back for 8 years. So interesting to hear him say now that in this campaign they have to have Kamala Harris's back. And it's another note of history. In 2008, of course, Joe Biden was facing off in a debate against a woman vice presidential candidate. I was on the plane with him for every day of that vice presidential campaign. And for the first month, every day, Joe Biden was asked in some form about how he would confront Sarah Palin in a debate. And the obvious questions about whether a male candidate and then the potential pitfalls of facing a female candidate. Joe Biden knows this dynamic very well, and that was something he clearly leaned into in his remarks. They clearly feel that this is something that can galvanize voters, and he wants to make sure that that point is clear, Chuck. And then I think they'll
suit in pearls and sensible heels. So I think they've got a real time on their hands in terms of what they're going to try to do to her. It's going to be very hard because she's so skilled, and she, I think, is going to connect very well in this medium of television, because this is the way that she's going to be presented. They're not going to be these big moments and big speeches and big rallies. So I thought this was a tremendous effort by her. We've seen, I think, in Kamala Harris somebody who can hit a home run and then maybe a couple of singles here and there. As an athlete, you might describe her as somebody who is somewhat streaky. But here, I thought if this is how she's going to present herself over these next 80 days or so, I think this was a tremendous effort out of the gate. In some ways, a different version of Kamala Harris than we've seen before. A real, I think, complete package in terms of her speaking ability and presenting a real fulsome version of herself and her story.
This was both simultaneously a predictable and safe choice because she's been vetted, she's been on the national stage, and a bold choice because of the historic nature of it. He picked somebody that, one, automatically made the ticket that Joe Biden is leading, one of racial diversity, one of gender diversity, and one of generational diversity. He picked somebody that embodies the two biggest social movements in the last 5 years, which is Black Lives Matter and the Me Too movement, and he picked somebody that both is a tough prosecutor and can prosecute a case against Donald Trump and the administration, but also in many ways exudes this tremendous amount of warmth. So she is a paradox in many ways. She is a predictable, safe choice, but she also really is a bold and historical choice.
And finally, let's end there. Leah Wright-Rigueur, professor of politics at Harvard University. There's going to be many battles in these 83 days ahead. But for today, for this moment, it is another barrier broken in America.
It's historic. We have the first black woman as vice presidential candidate on a national ticket and the first Asian American woman as a vice presidential candidate on a national ticket. And the bigger thing, which I think Biden and Harris managed to do today, was about changing the narrative and setting the stage for these next 83 days. We talked a lot about how there are some fractures within the Democratic Party. There are some issues that Harris in particular has to face with black voters, given her record, and including in the Senate, but also as a prosecutor. But one of the things that they did really well today is they set a narrative that centered around family and around conscience, the conscience of the nation, the conscience of the Democratic Party, and also asked
asking people on the ground who might be critical to hold them accountable and to move forward and to say that the work doesn't end on November 3rd. It begins. It really does begin. And then also making this a referendum about Donald Trump in ways that the Trump campaign simply hasn't been able to adjust to. They don't know how to handle a Biden-Harris campaign. And so that is what we should be looking forward to, how Biden and Harris really begin to sculpt the narrative for the presidential election and campaign moving forward.
That is for the next 83 days. We also saw some nuts and bolts politics from both Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, both making fundraising appeals, telling people to get out there and register and vote. This is all just days ahead of what will certainly be a very different Democratic convention starting in Monday, not in Milwaukee where it was supposed to be, but basically all around the country. We're going to return now to our regular programming. We'll have a full report tonight on World News Tonight with David Muir. Have a good afternoon.
This has been a special report from ABC News.
Who came from opposite sides of the world and what that was and the way that she grew up in civil rights activism, that was a critical piece of it as well. And then it was the hope part, the selling to the American people the notion that this team of Biden and Harris will fight for you during this time of the pandemic. I mean, both at the top and the bottom of the speech, it came back to this pandemic election and coronavirus, and that was clearly by design, and that is clearly where the Biden team, now Harris a part of it, is going to keep its focus. I would just note one other thing from Vice President Biden's remarks that I thought was also very telling about how they're framing Kamala Harris into this larger narrative. He talked about her story being an American story as he's introducing her to the public. Anytime they appear hereafter, she'll be the one, if they appear together again, to introduce him. But here, he was introducing her, and I thought it was so interesting when the former vice president said, our stories, his and Kamala Harris's, may be different in the particulars. Obviously, you're looking at a 77-year-old white guy, grew up in Scranton, very different generation, and a totally different visual, obviously, than the first black woman, Indian American woman on a major party ticket. He said, they may be different in the particulars, but we are the same. We have the same story in the essentials. And I thought that was a clear way of how the Biden campaign was going to bridge what are two very different people, two different approaches, clearly of different generations, and clearly of different moments in time, and the way in which they're weaving those stories together as they take the case against Donald Trump to the American people.
Van Jones is also joining us. Van, I mean, if Joe Biden was looking for somebody who had strengths that he does not have, or abilities that he does not have, we certainly saw some of those on display today.
Look, I mean, it was a beautiful speech. Both of them, they strengthen each other. They're both steadier together. They're both stronger together. That was such a beautiful thing to see. I think if you got to give a headline today, it would be Hope Reborn. That's what I felt. Hope Reborn. It's been, you just haven't heard people talking that way about the country and cutting through and seeming authentic for too long. But I think that Kamala Harris did something incredibly beautiful. She was able to talk about his son in a way that humanized herself, that humanized Beau, and humanized Joe Biden in a way that I think people have kind of lost track of sometimes. The plot line around Joe Biden has gotten cluttered about the memes and the jokes and that type of stuff. This is a man that suffered a lot, and he's a good man. He's a good man. And she brought that back into the conversation in a beautiful way. And in so doing, this idea that she's a phony, this type of thing, there's something about the fact that there isn't an audience to play to here. There's no rally to try to whip up. The intimacy of that space allowed her to come in a different register. And that was the real Kamala. That's a Kamala that I've known for 20 years. That's a Kamala that cares about real people. She's comfortable in her own skin. She loves people. It shows. And I thought, listen, taking away the rallies from this particular team, I think makes them even harder to beat. because they get a chance to speak in such a heartful and intimate way.
Well, I think what you said is such an important point. The intimacy of this kind of campaigning, it's really unlike anything we have seen, and it is something that I do think plays to a strength that she has, just in that the box of the television, the box of an online Zoom call, or whatever the medium is, there is an intimacy to it that she does. I don't know if it's a generational thing, but she's able to punch.
Jesse, I just want to say something. Look, I wish him all good health. That's not what I'm talking about. He's got the numbers. But things are so crazy right now. I don't know what's happening in the Democrat Party. And that's all I'm saying. I mean, I hope he lives forever. That's not my point.
Right.
And I know he's got the numbers.
Right. We understand. All right. Again, still awaiting President Trump's news conference at the White House briefing room, and we will bring it to you whenever it begins. All right, Dana Perino, you heard the judge and Brett Baer talk about Kamala's voting record. I mean, it is farther to the left than Elizabeth Warren, than Bernie Sanders. As Judge Jeanine Pirro mentioned, she's against fracking, which is the cleanest, most fuel-efficient way to power this country. It's made us energy independent and created tens of thousands of jobs. Some of the things she said about open borders and giving health insurance to illegal immigrants. Do you think she'll be challenged on those issues, or do you think she'll kind of skate by under the guise of pragmatic moderate, as the New York Times has deemed her?
Yeah, that New York Times tweet was quite the eye-opener, and I don't even think she would describe herself as a pragmatic moderate. She might think that that's offensive, actually. On the fact, it's not just on her voting record. Even look at her legislative record. To date, the only law that she has passed was a dedication to a memorial. When Barack Obama chose Joe Biden to be his vice presidential nominee, one of the reasons was he wanted an elder statesman that was more of the sort of establishment part of the Democratic Party, and two, he wanted somebody who could work on Capitol Hill very well and get deals done, such as when they were able to finally pull Obamacare across the finish line. Kamala Harris, I don't think, has those chops at this point, and her experience doesn't include that. I do think she is going to be challenged on all of those things. I know that the media has been, they have a softer touch with the Democrats, they always do. And they have a little soft touch when the announcement's first made, and it is historic, and this is a moment. But as I said, this is probably the very best day the Biden-Harris campaign will have. From here on out, you have reporters who are also ambitious. And yes, at some point, a reporter is going to say, when you said you were for this, but then against it, but then you're for it again, where are you actually? When you said that you're against all fracking, but Joe Biden says he is for just banning fracking on federal lands, where do you land on that? What is your policy position going to be? When they ask her about private health insurance, you said you were for banning private health insurance, but then you walked that back. Like, what do you stand for? What do you actually believe? I think that those questions will absolutely be asked. It might be subtle, right? But the other thing you're going to see is you're going to see media support for her that will be what I call sort of soft power when it comes to media support. I think you probably saw today that the woman, the actress that plays her on Saturday Night Live is like, oh boy, now she's going to be really busy. But I think it will also be not in terms of like where they make fun of Donald Trump. It's more like when they had Hillary Clinton. And then they didn't really go after her too often. Every once in a while, a shot. But the soft media power that she will have will probably push her along a little bit. I think on the money side of things, they've got this grassroots push. They are trying to make up for lost time because the Trump administration or Trump campaign was so far ahead when it came to the money game. They're catching up. We'll see if actually people want to put their money where their mouth is. My last point. Hillary Clinton did not get enough black Americans to come out to vote for her. She fell short over and over again. Does this pick change that for this ticket this time? This is going to be a very close election. And so getting everybody out to vote is going to be really important. How do you do it in a pandemic? Also remains to be seen. But can she bring more African Americans out to vote than in 2016? I think the Biden campaign is betting yes.
Okay, let's go back to Brett Baer on that question. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's go to Greg Gutfeld on that question. Everyone today in the media is talking a lot about how Kamala Harris is going to really energize the minority communities, but if you look at the polling and look at the votes cast in the primary, she did not energize the minority communities at all, and she dropped out very, very early. What do you think makes the difference this time? Where do you think she helps? Do you think that they think she helps with women? What are your thoughts?
Well, she has improved since then. Remember, she only got 3% support. She's not well liked in California, but she took some time off. She revamped her staff. But I want to say this. Judge Jeanine is not far off in what her intuition is. When CNN publishes a piece that says Harris is ready to take over when Joe steps aside, you can already tell that they're setting the table for something, a takeover. Maybe they meant the first term is over, but that's not really what you're getting at. I believe that Joe Biden, in many ways, has been seen as kind of a Trojan horse, and that is not a conspiracy when you see people on the left saying the same thing. Now,
rhetoric into the let's have a negotiation conversation.
I'm sure, Chuck, and Joe Biden is uniquely positioned to be the one who can attack the president for not showing up to these negotiations. And I'm sure Biden fully understands. I mean, let's not forget, he is really a creature of the Senate. He loves the Senate. He was there for so much of his political career, and I have no doubt that he fully understands the real dynamic on Capitol Hill, which is that for the most part, everybody wants the president to stay out of it, because every time he sticks his toe in it, everything has tendency to blow up. So there has this dynamic that's been developed where, you know, Republicans negotiate with officials, they crack a deal, the administration officials make sure that the president, whatever, you know, hard feelings there may be or issues that he has are very carefully taken care of before they say anything in public. But, you know, the reality has been that the president has been completely uninvolved with these negotiations. That's why. But, you know, while they were negotiating over the weekend, he was out playing golf. That's simply the facts of the matter. And today there has been another round of back and forth. There's now a dispute between Speaker Pelosi and Steve Mnuchin over who said what on the phone call that they had. Mnuchin calling Pelosi saying, well, they wouldn't agree to say that they would compromise. Mnuchin saying, no, actually Pelosi said she wouldn't compromise. So the upshot is that there are millions of Americans waiting for this relief, and Congress is basically fulfilling kind of the worst of what Americans tend to think about Congress. And there has been no action the last couple of days. The hallways have been empty. I mean, typically August is a dead zone here, but there are people who are waiting for these checks who are watching minute by minute to see if anything is going to happen. And, you know, the former vice president, the Democratic presidential nominee wading into this, I think underscores kind of the broader contours of this in a way that helps Democrats get it out of those back and forth weeds that can be troublesome politically.
I'll be very curious to see. I do think both Biden and Harris were effective at poking Trump personally. I thought both you, Casey, and Monica pointed out there's no doubt the president's going to get defensive about golfing over the weekend. He gets defensive every time it comes up, and he'll get defensive at these hits on his attacks. I want to bring one more person in this conversation. We've had an interesting shortened show here. I've got the president of Howard University. He happens to be an MD. It's Dr. Wayne A.I. Frederick. And Dr. Frederick, honestly, you were booked today because we were going to talk about a lot about the virus. But I would like you to sort of, this is a huge moment for Howard University, a huge moment for HBCU, I assume alum around this country. Kamala Harris, Howard alumna, potentially the next vice president of the United States. Your reaction today as president of this of Howard University?
You know, absolutely exhilarating. When you think of, I'm a triple alum myself, and you think that somebody that walked the same halls as our current students and the same halls that I did, to be sent to this position of opportunity is absolutely remarkable, and especially at this time in the nation's history. I want to underscore that for all the labels that she's being given, I hope that we will focus on how well prepared she is. Her intellect, her experience, and her track record of what she has done. Her poise is absolutely incredible. I had the opportunity to speak to her on Monday, She's become a good friend. She was part of the search committee that selected me as president. And as I've come to know her, and just as my conversation on Monday revealed, you cannot have a more down-to-earth, humble person who can relate to so many of Americans today who are in different stations of life. And so we really are extremely proud. There are many who've gone before her that have paved her way. The Bernard Jordans of our time, Elijah Cummings, so many Howard alums, Toni Morrison, that have paved the way for this. And she will now pave the way for so many others.
Mandela Barnes, there was a poll coming out over the last 24 hours, the Marquette poll, which is sort of the poll that everybody looks to in Wisconsin about where's the race.
Sure, that can impact people in a way that it never has before. Because really what you see is a person who cares about making sure people are not left out. That's the kind of person she has always been, and her record supports the decisions that she continues to make.
There are some on the more progressive wing of the Democratic Party who have concerns about her record as a prosecutor, her record as a district attorney. What do you say to people who may think that she is too much of the establishment?
And I want to say it again, Anderson. I was here in the trenches. I grew up in those violent situations, born and raised over half of my life living in this. So we had a completely different experiences. And for those that are critical, many times those people weren't even in the trenches working in the community every single day to address those issues. We had a shooting in front of over 50 kids and adults in one of our gyms, which was a safe haven. This kid was shot and killed in front of all of them. Kamala called us not to figure out who she can prosecute, but how we were getting help and support for those kids and those families. So like no other DAI experience. I think at the end of the day, we know that there are going to be some critics. There always are when you're an elected leader, but especially a Black woman. And the fact is, Kamala has done an incredible job. No one is perfect, but we have the perfect ticket with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris for the Democratic Party, and it's now time to get them elected and focus on the bigger picture. Either we are going to fight amongst one another and criticize and tear one another down, or we're going to focus on real change. Let's not make the mistake we did 4 years ago, because we have been living in a nightmare for the past 4 years, and we need real leadership.
Obviously, a lot has been commented on this, but I mean, to you, what does it mean to have a woman who is Black, to have a woman of South Asian descent? What does it mean for America?
Well, I got to tell you, I watched this speech. I know Kamala personally, and not only am I proud of her, I am proud of what she represents, and it's hopeful. It's hopeful, it's compassion. It's not just because she's a Black woman, it's because of who she is as a person and what she represents, and her experiences that are very similar to mine. It gets me so excited of knowing that if someone like Kamala to be chosen for such a position, then it's not only possible for me, but the next generation of young girls that are growing up in this country, they know that anything is possible, and they will never, moving forward, let their circumstances determine who they become in life, because they are seeing an example in Kamala Harris.
We've already seen the lines of attack from the president, or at least some of them. They seem to be kind of struggling or figuring it out. I think the president is now calling them both socialists. He said she's nasty, disrespectful to Brett Kavanaugh. Where do you think they're going to try to target her background?
I think they're going to throw everything at her, and some of those things are going to be true, and some of those things aren't going to be true. They're going to take and twist her record and what she did and what she didn't do. I mean, but here's the thing. Someone like Kamala this is not her first rodeo. She's been through this. I campaigned with her when she ran for Attorney General up and down the state. You should have heard some of the horrible things that was said about her. And the fact is, she knows how to handle herself. She is strong, she is clear, she is decisive, and she is fierce. And she is going to do what's necessary to focus on the issues
to focus on making sure people understand the importance of this election and getting out to vote, because we can't control what other people say or what they're putting out there. But what we can do is control the message and make sure that people know who Kamala is and how important it is to make sure she and Joe Biden are elected in November. That has to be the focus every time people try to go to a different direction.
Mayor London Breed, appreciate your time. Thank you very much. It is the top of the hour. I'm going to hand it off to my colleague, Jim Acosta, who picks it up from here. I'll see you later tonight.
Match of the $1 Million Masters.
Moving furniture, existing furniture from classrooms so that desks can be spread further apart, making sure students, when they're traveling in the hallways, they're keeping spread out, going the same directions when that's possible.
In larger gathering areas, there are plans for proper space between people, and schools will have signage throughout the building for reminders. With many schools throughout the district, each one brings challenges when it comes to space.
Looks different at the different levels and even at different schools given the physical layout of a building. So, you know, everybody will be learning that, and then the teachers will be reinforcing that as we move forward.
And as staff and students move through the pandemic together, the Sioux Falls School District wants it to be a collaborative effort between the two to keep everybody safe.
So no punishment. It would look like a redirection and re-educating and just reminders. This is new for everyone, and so it's going to take, you know, reminders for everybody to find a new routine. So it's just working with our students and staff.
Now, most schools do have similar social distancing rules as the Sioux Falls School Districts, and most districts do lay out those rules on their website. In Sioux Falls, I'm Jacob Sersasimo, Dakota News Now.
That means some families will be thinking about what to pack for lunches. But there are a lot of choices, from what to include to how creative you want to get.
I think it's an opportunity to not put so much stress on the parents, you know.
Of all the heroic and ambitious.
Manufacturing is dead. You need a magic wand. Well, you don't need a magic wand. You need...
Kamala, this is an exciting day. It's a good...
And the production index is at the highest reading since October of 18, which is was an extraordinary period of time. That's pretty good. These are numbers that nobody has seen until just recently, and now they're just coming out. These are numbers that are leading, I guess, stock market people. They're very smart people. I know many of them. And they're seeing things that they don't even believe. So the manufacturing sector is booming.
Because of Trump's failures of leadership, our economy has taken one of the...
I want to quote nasty, whining about how...
1 million more jobs than experts predicted. So there you are. You look at that, and that's a record, and it's a record for the quarter. We had over 9 million, substantially more than 9 million jobs. So those are incredible numbers about our economy and how it's coming back. It's coming back very strongly. It's coming back at a level that's far greater than anybody anticipated. And we're very proud of that. And I give, we'll be talking about it if you have any questions on it. I shouldn't have any questions. I didn't print those charts. Who did? The Economy Journal? Let's say, I don't know. We'll find that out for you. But it wasn't us. We took those numbers from somebody. Where did you get those numbers, Larry? They're from where?
It's from BLS Jobs Report.
BLS Jobs
Report. Jobs Report through July.
Okay. Everybody has that. Everybody needs. The Democrats have abandoned the American people over the simple subject of politics. Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi are holding the American people hostage over money for their radical left-wing agenda that the country doesn't want and won't accept. For example, they've asked for a ridiculous $3.5 billion, that's billion, $3.5 billion for universal mail-in voting, a system riddled by fraud and corruption. You just look at what happened with the Carolyn Maloney race. They should do that race over, by the way. I think her opponent is right when he is having fits about that race. When you look at the ballots that are missing and what's going on with that race, and yet they declared her a winner. So her opponent, I don't know what's happened over the last 24 hours, but her opponent is rightfully going a little bit crazy.
Harris affirms that black women matter to the Democratic Party and that.
I mean, listen, it was a successful event. There's no doubt about it. I think Arlette highlighted, though, it also just looked different than we normally see in these events.
Made a mistake. And many were sent to dead people, many were sent to, number were sent, I guess two, that at least, 2, 3, 4, were sent to dogs. One was sent to a cat. They're sent all over the place. That was in Virginia and Paterson, New Jersey. And they had a massive amount of voter fraud. And it's been a disaster. Paterson, New Jersey, has been a total disaster. That's universal mail-in voting. So they want $3.5 billion for universal mail-in voting for the country. We have hundreds of millions of voters. They can't do a little race with 20,000 people. Now, mail-in voting, it's going to be the greatest fraud in the history of elections. When you always talk about Russia, 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 China, Iran on voting, your biggest problem is going to be with the Democrats, not with China and Russia and Iran. Your biggest problem is going to be with the Democrats. But now the Democrats, they want $3.5 billion, think of it. But now that they're unwilling to approve a bill that gives all of that money, of course we would never approve an amount like that, and they also want $25 billion additional for the post office, Steve, $25 billion for the post office, so the post office can handle this vast amount of ballots that are being sent at random all over the place. They have no...
That was in the street that's been decades brewing.
Tell you, somebody who has presented my fair share of arguments in court.
As we speak, especially in this moment of crisis.
Post office because of this. And remember, the new man who's a great person, a great businessman, just got there a little while ago. The post office has been run poorly for many, many decades. Great people in the post office, incredible people, but they've had very bad leadership for many years, so we'll get it straightened out. But they turned down this bill because they want radical left agenda items that nobody in their right mind would approve. So they want $25 billion for the post office. They want $3.5 billion for universal mailing, $3.5 billion. And the bill's not going to happen because they don't even want to talk about it, because we can't give them the kind of ridiculous things that they want that have nothing to do with the China virus. It has nothing at all to do with China virus, much of what they're asking for. So therefore, they don't have the money to do the universal mail-in voting. So therefore, they can't do it, I guess, right? Are they going to do it even though they don't have the money? They're asking for the $3.5 billion. They're asking for $25 billion for the post office so they can do this, I guess, and other things. At 25, I would hope it would be a lot of other things too. But therefore, they don't have it. They don't have the money to do the universal mail-in votes. It'll be the greatest rigged election in history. It'll be the greatest fraud ever perpetrated, other than perhaps what they did to my campaign, where they spied on my campaign, President Obama, Biden, and everybody else. And they got caught. Let's see what happens. This will be one of the greatest frauds in history. So they're admitting that they want $3.5 billion, and they're not going to do a deal that's good for the American people. Therefore, they're not going to get the $3.5 billion. Therefore, they can't do the universal mail-in vote. What are they going to do it if they don't have the money to do it? The Democrats are also holding up money for schools and hospitals and small businesses and state and local governments. They tried to stop Americans from getting unemployment insurance and protection from evictions. which is why I took this decisive action. And I did executive orders, which are now in full force and effect. And they're going forward. I signed a directive to provide a total of $400 of additional support for Americans who are unemployed due to the China virus. That's $400 more than the Democrats have provided. Remember that. That's $400 more than the Democrats have provided.
We've been collecting, of course, reaction reporting on it. In Florida, a key state where we're seeing voters take this news in. Take a look.
Obviously a big moment for Joe Biden. All the networks were watching. He was able to speak to the entire nation. But this was the rollout of Kamala.
To die out. In fact, here's the latest forecast model. Does this one? They kind of fade down Nebraska and then go away. This is 10 o'clock tonight. Skies will be mostly...
Okay, here comes the clue.
With interest rates at historical lows, now may be the time for you to...
Later. No real leadership or plan.
Dollars, and that's now in the works, and that'll be getting out to the people soon, Steve, okay? Remember that, $25 is what they gave the last time, 25. I want to make it unmistakably clear that I'm protecting people from evictions. They didn't want to do that. The Democrats didn't want to do a protection from evictions. People getting evicted because of the coronavirus or the China virus, whatever you want to call it. We have 20, now we're up to 21 different names. All we know is it came out of China and it shouldn't have. They should have stopped it. Under my executive order, HUD, HHS, and CDC have been directed to ensure renters and homeowners that they can stay safely in their homes. They're not going to be evicted. They are not going to be evicted. And those letters have already been sent out, Steve, so you'll make sure of that. I'm providing a payroll tax holiday to all Americans earning less than $100,000 per year, meaning bigger paychecks for working families through the end of 2020. Amount of money that's being supplied and given to families, tremendous. The Democrats didn't want to do a payroll tax. They thought it was too much money, I guess, or it would make businesses too successful. They don't want to see success. They certainly don't want to see it before the election. They certainly don't want to see the kind of graphs and charts that you saw up there. They don't, because they say they can't win with that kind of success. They can't win. They have to get used to it. Remember, we've already gotten $3 trillion in stimulus, so they should have probably negotiated a little bit differently.
Softening, she's being charismatic, she's letting people in so that they get a sense of what she values, because
for her too, in the face of these racist and sexist attacks coming.
If I told you this 3 years ago, you'd look at me like I was being crazy.
It's going to come from the general fund. We're not going to touch Social Security. I said from day one that we're going to protect Social Security, and we're going to protect our people. And Social Security is one of the things that will be protected. Pre-existing conditions will be protected. Medicare will be protected. But Social Security will be totally protected under me. Under them, it will not be protected because we will have a stock market crash, the likes of which you've never seen. Your taxes will be doubled and tripled. And your regulations will go through the roof, which is what was causing the problems with the country in the first place. Student loans, I signed a directive providing relief to student borrowers. Not their fault that they can't go to college. I will be deferring payments on student loans at zero interest until further notice. So we're going to take care of our students. They got hit like everybody else. So I will be deferring payments on student loans at zero interest until further notice. And on the payroll tax, we'll be terminating the payroll tax after I hopefully get elected. We'll be terminating the payroll tax, so that will mean anywhere from $5,000 to even more per family, and also great for businesses and great for jobs. A lot of people would be very happy to hear that. A lot of the great, certainly conservative economists would be great to have. They think that's the greatest thing we can do. That's better than the payments. That's better than anything else. But it's a lot of money, and it's going right directly to the people, and it goes there very easily. But it also creates stronger companies to employ the people.
That is working together and seem to genuinely like and respect each other, I think that's going to go a long way for them as we move toward November.
7 times more likely to be infected than those who did not. A new study finds marijuana use during pregnancy makes it 1.5 times more likely the child will develop autism. The study followed.
Set the stakes really high for this election. He said that this election.
The beginning, EN, those.
Of fun in 2020, September 3rd through the 7th, kicking off grand.
To kids with low birth weights, impulsivity, hyperactivity, and other issues.
In this evening's business news.
With the same intensity I do. For she's someone who knows what's at stake. The question is, for all Americans to answer, who are we as a nation? What do we...
We're all working towards something that will happen before the end of the year, maybe substantially before, but before the end of the year. And therapeutics will happen likewise even sooner. For that responsible path forward to shelter those at highest risk while allowing those at lower risk to resume work and school and play football. Go play football. I spoke to some of the great football players, college players, Trevor, and a lot of great players called Coach O. A lot of fantastic people I got to speak to, athletes, leaders. They want to play football. Let them play. Let them play. And they feel safer on the field than they do walking around and doing nothing. So hopefully that will happen. And hopefully when they play football, they will proudly stand for the national anthem, and they will proudly stand and respect the American flag. Or at least I'm now watching. I can't speak for others, but based on what I see now and based on what I'm looking at with respect to the NBA at this point, a lot of people agree with me. So we would like to request people, you stand proudly for the flag and for the national anthem. In the months since the virus arrived, we've learned a great deal. Well, this is a dangerous and highly infectious disease that primarily affects the oldest segment of our population or those with chronic health issues. The United States has the largest nursing home and assisted living home population in the Western world by far. Nearly half of all of the deaths from the China virus in the United States have occurred in nursing homes and long-term care facilities. The median age of those who succumb to the virus is 78 years old. These findings underscore that all Americans must continue to apply extreme vigilance in protecting our elderly population and those with chronic conditions. Outcomes are very different for younger Americans without serious health issues, tremendously different. They can often expect mild or moderate symptoms or even no symptoms whatsoever. They have very strong immune systems. We've learned even more so than we ever thought. In a typical year, approximately 5 times as many Americans under the age of 65 die from heart disease as have so far been lost to the coronavirus from the same age group. That's an interesting statistic. Plus, blessedly, children appear to face the lowest risk of all. It's 99.995% of all fatalities are adults. Think of that, 99.95. That is extremely close to 100% of all fatalities are adults. Children often have only mild symptoms. Complications are incredibly rare, very, very, very rare. Those that do face complications often have underlying medical conditions. In each of the last 5 years, the flu resulted in more deaths of those under 18 in the United States than have been lost thus far to coronavirus by far. The flu does kill young people. Given these considerations, we believe many school districts can now reopen safely, provided they implement mitigation measures and health protocols to protect families, protect teachers, and protect students. All families should be empowered to make the decision that is right for their own circumstances. This is especially important if a child has underlying health conditions or lives with a parent or grandparent who is at a high risk. And one of the things we'd like to do is when we make payment to schools, because we spend a lot of money on schools, we'd like to make the payment directly to the student or to the child. And that would be to the parents essentially, but to the child. We want to follow the child so that if a school is closed, the family can go to another school, maybe in another area, but they can do it, and would like to make that payment. Rather than paying a school that's closed, would rather pay directly. We're following the child, where the child goes, and we want to pay the family, pay the child, and then the family can take care of the cost. And we're trying to get that approved too, but the Democrats don't like doing anything unless it means doing for the union, which controls Nancy and controls Chuck 100%. And I have nothing wrong with the union. I have great respect, very few people do I respect more than a great teacher. It's a tremendous talent. They're really underappreciated. These are phenomenal people with tremendous talent. The great ones are among the most important people we have in this country. And they'll be great they'll be great at charter schools. And they'll be great at, when we talk about school choice, which we'd like to see so that parents can take their children to the school of their choice. That's something we want. We think it's very important, especially in the minority communities. They want it so badly. African American, Hispanic American, Asian American, they want it so badly. But the two people I mentioned, Nancy and Chuck, they're totally controlled by the heads of the union. I think the teachers like us a lot. We're taking care of our teachers. We want to take care of our teachers. But we cannot indefinitely stop 50 million American children from going to school and harming their mental, physical, emotional, and academic development and inflicting long-term lasting damage. I heard a gentleman today, a great person, some of you were at that meeting, from Harvard, say that every year is $10,000. It's people, they lose a tremendous amount of money in the future. Mentioned $10,000. And I think he was talking about on a year.
Delighted Joe Biden made the absolute right decision, and I think Kamala will be fabulous as vice president. We have to get them elected, obviously.
It is likely they're going to get little or no rainfall over the next 7 days. So the drought conditions probably going to be worsening in southwestern South Dakota. The period looks pretty dry as well. Otherwise, for tonight, we'll see lows in this.
It is one that should have no place in modern day American politics, and we'll see.
Site. Remember Blockbuster Video? Well, there's one left. There's one store left, and it's in Oregon. The independently owned store is teaming up with Airbnb for a unique experience. For 3 nights only, people can book it for an overnight sleepover. The store has been temporarily converted into a makeshift living room with a pull-out couch, a 90s era chunky big screen TV and VCR. You have all the store's videos at your disposal, and you also get free pizza, soda, popcorn, and candy, all for $4 a night, which is 1 cent more than the cost of a rental. The catch, you have to be a resident of the county where the store resides. A lot of people going, aww, darn it. The weather has been putting on quite a show this week.
Who had just lost their mom and their sister in a tragic accident would know that the world was still turning. And that's how I came to know Joe. He's someone
in math and roughly 35% in reading compared to a typical year. Think of that. Cause the average student to fall 50% behind in math and 35% in reading compared to being at the school, being with your teachers, being in a classroom. We've learned that. We've learned that learning from a laptop is not great. And frankly, we've also learned that telehealth, a little unrelated, but it's up 35,000%, and it's been incredible. 35,000%. We'll check that number, Larry, but that's an incredible, but it is people staying home and the telehealth, that has been a tremendous success. We've learned those two things during this period of time with the plague coming in, and those are two things we know. School closures harm low-income students the most because they have less access to high-quality remote learning. They don't have computers and less resources for academic support. All schools should be making plans to resume in-person classes as soon as possible. To support the reopening of America's schools, we provided $13 billion in elementary and secondary schools toward the CARES Act and CARES Act funding. We're giving CARES Act funding, the vast majority of which remain available for states to use. So a tremendous amount of money, $13 billion. That's the CARES Act funding, and we're giving a large portion of that for states to use. Today I'm pleased to announce that we will provide up to 125 million reusable masks to various school districts all around the country. My administration also stands ready to deploy CDC teams to support schools that are opening, need help in safety and in order to safely reopen. Finally, today my administration is highlighting general recommendations for all schools and guidance to protect high-risk teachers and students. We're working very, very closely with many of the schools and school districts throughout the country. They include the following: to ensure all students, teachers, and staff understand the symptoms of the China virus, require all students, teachers, and staff to self-assess their health every morning before coming to school, encourage frequent hand washing or hand sanitizing during the school day, beginning upon entrance to school, and ensuring that hand washing facilities are widely available throughout the school. And for the most part, schools have been very good at that. Minimize large indoor gatherings, hold large gatherings outdoors whenever possible, maintain high standards of hygiene and ventilation within the classrooms, including keeping windows and doors open whenever possible, and running fans and air conditioning units whenever possible. Require students, teachers, and staff to socially distance around high-risk individuals and socially distance whenever possible in any event. Encourage the use of masks when social distancing is not possible. Regarding hygiene and social distancing all over the school and all around the school. We encourage schools to adopt these measures. We've been working with so many of them, and to the best of my knowledge, virtually every one of them agrees to do that. While we're also providing high-risk teachers and students options to engage in distance teaching or learning. We're working on that also. College.
It complements and adds to the American fabric. It really does. It's a heartwarming story, both of them, Biden and Harris.
The suggested donation for each box or bag of paper is $5. Here's a look at the 3 drop-off locations.
Thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it. Let's get right to it. You saw Biden and Harris attacking President Trump's record in the White House during their first event together. They spoke about the possibility
really to help.
He loves us.
Countries are following the science, Trump pushed miracle cures he saw on Fox News. While other countries were flattening the curve, he said the virus would be of toughness.
By any means the most important metric to focus on, because the fact is we have more cases because we have far more testing than any country in the world. There's no country that's even close. We've done more testing and better testing than any country, and many of these countries that the media was putting up as a shining example of success, they're right now in massive outbreaks. You see what's going on in many of the countries that you constantly mention. Far more important is who the virus is infecting. That's why our strategy and attention are focused on preventing the cases that are most likely to require hospitalization or result in death, those that afflict the elderly and those with certain underlying health conditions, all the while acting to
football, the changes to the fall sports season just announced. Increasing infections. Texas surpasses 500,000 cases of coronavirus as 1 in 4 people tested are positive. Tonight, the 3 major cities now projected to be hotspots this fall. Plus, did a shortage of protective gear in California lead to nearly 16,000 essential workers getting sick? The new Democratic ticket makes its debut.
And I couldn't be prouder to be by his side,
firing off on President Trump and laying out their vision for the next 4 years. Going on the offensive, President Trump launches fresh attacks against his new rivals. Plus, why is the president's son-in-law meeting with Kanye West? Canine attack. Why did police order
will be voting for me, and his reason why. Also tonight, the new and dire warning from the head of the CDC, Dr. Robert Redfield, on masks tonight, saying that he's not asking some of America to do it, that we all have to do it. Warning we could have the worst fall in U.S. history if we don't. The flashpoint tonight over opening schools. More than 1,000 students and staff quarantined in one district. An entire high school shut down. And the new model, what it warns when it comes to several major cities in the U.S. And tonight, the study here on different types of masks. Which do best and the ones that might not help at all. Overseas tonight, the horrific pictures coming in, the deadly train crash, several cars derailed.
Working with us for a period of time, and I thought it would be great. He was saying things to me the other day. I said it would be great if you could tell that to the media. So this is the first time I've shared the platform, and it's an honor to do so. Scott is truly he's a brilliant man, he's a wonderful man, and he cares about this subject very much. And I'd like to ask Scott to come up, please, and say a few words. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's obviously a great honor to be here and a great honor to serve this president who's really focused on the very important parts of the pandemic. And I'm new here, I'm just sort of getting involved, but I want to thank you and the Vice President and the entire team, the task force team, and all the people who are not very visible really for working so hard. These people are working 24/7, and it's quite amazing. And I think today we had a fantastic event that I'll just mention on opening the schools, because the President's priority is to open the schools and open them safely and have parents have the options to either use open schools or do whatever they can to eventually get back to open schools, including any kind of hybrid or other arrangement they may want to do. It was a great event. We had a group of fantastic parents, teachers, medical experts, and it went very well. And so I won't spend a lot of time up here, but can help out in some way. Thank you.
Steve, thank you.
You mentioned the executive orders that you signed. Are we now unlikely to see any more stimulus legislation before the election?
Well, we're giving 400
of kids who cannot go back to school.
Harris is now elevated, of course, on this.
4%. By the way, that's a really high number. It really means that there are a lot of cases that are being missed across the state.
Texas now reporting more than 500,000 cases.
And that's a number that's bigger than any of the numbers we talked about. And the beauty of that is it really incentivizes companies, and because it's both a company cut and a employee cut, so that really very much incentivizes people to go back to work and work hard, and the company to hire people back. And we've had some of the great economic minds saying that's the most important cut, that would be the best cut you could do. We couldn't get the Democrats to even think about agreeing to it. It's not the Democrat way, I guess, because it just seems that whether it's Larry Kudlow or any of your many friends, that's the one they wanted the most. Would you say, Larry? And so we're doing that, and that was never even really discussed because that was taken off the table by the Democrats immediately. And this is every week you get a check, or a month, or bi-weekly. This is a major amount of money that you're getting directly. So it's really, it's a very big number. It's a very substantial number. And this is, don't forget, this is in addition to the...
Actually seeing more drugs. Although numbers from the Department of Public Safety suggest it's close to what they saw at last year's rally, the Sturgis police chief described the increase in misdemeanor drugs and the arrests as skyrocketing.
No, I think it's just all over, honestly. You can't just narrow down just to the states that have legalized it, the medical side of it. Everybody seems to be having more drugs on their possession now.
So far, DUI arrests at the rally are down by roughly 15
themselves. He really was the best of us. And when I would ask him, where'd you get that? Where did this come from? He'd always talk about his dad. And I will tell you, the love that they shared was incredible to watch. To be by his side, running to represent you, the people.
And Biden, with his new partner, Kamala, will, if you think, he's going to put it all back, but many times more. I mean, they want to increase regulations, and that's just going to drive companies out, and it's going to drive people out. It's going to drive them to other countries, and it's going to make us not competitive with other countries. Please, oh yeah.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to highlight a kind of odd situation. In the last hour or so, if you Googled Antifa.com, it would take you straight to Joe Biden's website, his official campaign website. Odd situation. We don't know who's behind that. But it raises an interesting leadership question. Should Joe Biden, the Democratic Party, Kamala Harris, should they publicly denounce the Antifa as a domestic terrorist organization?
They should. I think they're afraid to. It's, in my book, it's virtually a part of their campaign, Antifa. The Democrats act like, gee, I don't know exactly what that is. Take a look at Portland. Take a look at any place you want to take a look at. And they're all over the place. They were here. We put on a 10-year prison sentence if you knock down any statues 2 months ago, and since then we haven't seen much of them. We had to send border security. We sent actually Homeland and border and different forms of Homeland to Portland in order to, you know what we had to do. We had to save. They wanted to knock down a courthouse, a $500 million courthouse. They wanted to burn it down, knock it down. And they were easily able to defend. But the mayor and the governor of the state, they didn't want to do that. And we actually sent our people there, and they did a great job. And they did it easily. But in the meantime, they went to other parts of the city, and they're doing damage. And we're recommending to the governor that they call in national security, call in the National Guard. We're willing to get, we would stop that problem in 1 hour. We sent just defensive courthouse from being burned down or knocked down. We also saved a couple of other buildings, federal buildings, because they were unable to do the job. I have to say this, they have really good police. They have a great group of people that if they would be allowed to do their job, same with Chicago and same with New York and a couple of other cities, if they allowed, in Chicago, 25,000 police, and they're really good, but they're not allowed to do their job. In New York, you have New York's finest, but they've totally taken away their incentive. They've they've taken away their lives in a sense because they don't allow them to do their job. They could do their job so easily, you wouldn't have a problem in New York. And that includes with terrorism and everything else. They disbanded. They've cut by $1 billion their budget in New York, $1 billion. And crime is up by 200%, 250%, depends on what week you're looking at. It's crazy what's going on in New York. We could solve that problem easily, but we don't.
The nominee came from the radio host Charlemagne the God on The Breakfast Club. It got a lot of attention for more than one comment in it.
Lawyers to conduct deep dives into 11 finalists. The search ended on Tuesday.
Is the answer yes?
The answer is absolutely yes, Joe.
As they were leaving.
And gladly, if they want, the National Guard will take care of it in 1 hour. It'll go very quickly. As we did, by the way, if you take a look in Minneapolis, when they were burning down Minneapolis, a wonderful place, but nobody's ever seen anything like it. After days, the very liberal, and these are all run by liberal Democrats. Every place I talk about is run because we have great cities, and they're run by Republicans. Okay, it's there's no magic to it. It's obvious what's going on, and the cities that I mentioned are all run by liberal, very liberal Democrats, and it's very sad when you see what's happening to New York. It's very sad when you see what's happening to other cities, not just those three, other cities. And when you look at what's happening, it's not even believable. I left New York almost 4 years ago, and you could see signs of problems because de Blasio was there. He's a horrific mayor, just horrific. I mean, people don't want to go there anymore. He's not only is it bad with crime, the way he talks about the city and what he does, he's horrific. And when I see that, it's a very sad thing. I left almost 4 years ago, right? And when I look and see what's happening to a city that I love, that still has great potential, but it's going to have to be brought back because what happened in New York is it's not even believable. What's happening in Chicago, where one weekend you had 78 people shot and 18 die in a weekend. And then successive weekends, you have so much of that happening, and it's really not even believable.
On a major party ticket.
I am incredibly honored by this responsibility, and I'm ready to get to work.
Harris is
quarantined after dozens tested positive. 2 high schools now closing for 2 weeks. A
Republican who really supported Nixon and campaigned for
because the country hasn't contained the virus. So what's your response to them, and what did that argue for a stronger federal response?
Well, look, you just saw it. Other countries were doing much better than all other major countries, peer countries. This chart came out just a little while ago. I thought I'd say, see, it's that kind of a question, the wise guy question, because I just went over the whole thing. We're doing better than almost everyone with the economy, and I think we face a headwind because Democrats, perhaps for political reasons, don't want to open up their states, and that's having a huge toll. That's taking a huge toll on people within those states. When you look at North Carolina, you have a man doesn't want to open it up. You look at Michigan, you look at some states. I mean, they just want to keep these people in their houses, in their prisons. They call them prisons, and I think a lot of it's for political reasons because they want to look as bad as possible on November 3rd. But I don't think it's going to matter because we're doing so well in so many ways. As far as the plague is concerned, when you look at the numbers, take a look at what's going on now with other countries. They're having flare-ups that are very, very substantial. And we've done very well. We're helping a lot of those countries. And those were model countries that you used to talk about and say how well they were doing, except they just exploded. They just had very big flare-ups. You understand that. Now, we're doing very well. And I don't have to show you the charts again, but those charts are at a level that nobody even thought possible. I think we're going to have a fantastic third quarter. I think next year will be one of the strongest years we've had.
Big rally in Detroit in March.
Look, I view myself as a bridge, not as anything else. There's an entire generation.
Had this $100,000 student debt.
200.
And early for this son of Boston, born into little.
Right? You disagree with it. We spent a great amount of time talking about it. We got to open up our country. We understand the disease. We understand who it hits. We have to protect our elderly people, especially our elderly people that are not well. We have to protect them. But we understand it, and we understand it well. We've learned a lot. And we're going to have the vaccine soon, and we're going to have the...
The case against Donald Trump and Mike Pence is open and shut.
Joe Biden and Kamala Harris just appeared together in their first campaign event right before you got up on this podium. Can you tell us if you watched their remarks and give us your reaction to them?
I didn't watch. I saw just a moment of him speaking, a moment of her speaking, and it was enough. Look, he made a choice. He picked her. I watched her. I watched her poll numbers go boom, 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 down to almost nothing. And she left angry. She left mad. There was nobody more insulting to Biden than she was. She said horrible things about him, including accusations made about him by a woman where she, I guess, believed the woman. And now all of a sudden she's running to be vice president, saying how wonderful he is. I thought it was...
Made had to say about her friendship with his late son, Beau Biden. The two of them have now left the building.
Better than anybody. She said horrible things about him, horrible things. And she mocked him, openly mocked him. That's why I thought that was a very risky pick, because I'm sure that'll be played back. Not necessarily by me, but others. It'll be played back. The other thing, if you look, she wants a $3 trillion tax hike.
Senator Kamala Harris never explicitly called for defunding the police, but she did say this.
We need to reimagine how we are achieving public safety in America.
That would triple, and you'd have unemployment that you wouldn't believe. In Pennsylvania last year had the best year they've ever had. Texas last year had the best year they've ever had. Oklahoma, best year. Almost every state in our nation last year had the best year they've ever had. And they're going to have that again next year. And you can see that by what, but think of it, she wants no fossil fuels. No fossil fuels. Really? Tell that to Texas. And then I hear, Trump is only 1 point up in Texas. Now, they said the same thing with crooked Hillary Clinton. They said, Texas is in play. Trump is down in Texas.
As a politically expedient flip-flop, similar to her reversal on health care. In 2017, Harris was the first senator to co-sponsor Bernie Sanders' Medicare for All.
Did she always have that tact when you knew her?
With the amounts in 2016. But you take a look at the tax cuts. We gave the biggest tax cut in the history of our country and the biggest regulation cuts in the history of our country by far. Right? He wants to increase everybody's taxes. And she's one of the people that wants that. I mean, you take a look at that. She wants to defund or at least substantially reduce money going to police departments. And you can't do that. You can't do that. It's actually got to be the opposite. I've been endorsed by so many police departments. I'm getting a really good one this week that you'll be seeing. Really big, really good. But who could ever, what police department, what law enforcement group could ever
develop right along I-29 about 48 hours.
Do not take Prolia if you have low blood calcium, are pregnant.
Governors at the time, I was honored to have been unanimously elected by my as the chairman of.
We're getting the military. She wants to spend much less on our military. I've rebuilt the military. We have the strongest military now. Much of the equipment is coming in, all made in the United States. $2.5 trillion we spent. When I took over, we had a military that was totally, it was in terrible, terrible shape.
Watching storms cause flash.
With you and for you. It can be very isolating, I think, to be in public life. And
people in the world, we never had anything like it. Some of the equipment is still coming in. No, we've done a real job, and I think we're going to be extremely successful. I was surprised that he picked her, very surprised because of the horrible way she talked about him, and frankly because she dropped like a rock. I didn't. When I ran against 17 people, mostly governors and senators, some others. Ben Carson was very strong, very good. A couple of others, but mostly governors, mostly senators, and I ran, and I went up. She ran and she went down to rock bottom. I don't think she ever got to run to take a vote in the first state. So generally speaking, you don't want to pick somebody that went down. She went down, but she went down in a very terrible way, and she said horrible things about Biden. She said far worse about Biden than I ever did, and now she's running as vice president. So how does that work? Please, in the back.
Mr. President, thanks for taking my question. I'm wondering tonight if you might have any words of encouragement for middle schoolers or high schoolers starting the school year strictly online who might be frustrated, wondering how they're going to get through the next quarter, missing their friends and teachers. Just wondering if you might have any words of encouragement for them.
It's such a fair question, such a good question. Yeah, I mean, you hear what I was saying, what Scott will be involved, and he'll be talking to you over the next couple of days, what he's saying from great experience. No, I feel very badly for him. And I have a feeling that on November 4th, somebody's going to announce schools are open, the country's open, everything's open. I really believe a lot of it's done for political reasons, if you want to know the truth. I think so. But you're right. Online is not the same as being in the classroom, and that's been proven. It's been proven loud and clear. Yeah, any other questions?
Mr. President.
Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. You have warned several times that if Joe Biden is elected president, that there will be an invasion in suburban neighborhoods. It's a sentiment that you expressed in a tweet again this morning. What exactly do you mean by invasion?
What I mean is people are going to become, they're going to be opening up areas of your neighborhood, which they're doing, and now they're going to do, they wanted to expand it, and they will expand it. If for any reason they're going to, in my opinion, destroy suburbia. And just so you understand, 30% plus of the people living in suburbia are minorities. African American, Asian American, Hispanic American, they're minorities, 30%. The number's even higher. They say 35, but I like to cut it a little bit lower. You know why? That way I can never get myself in too much trouble with the fake news. But 30% plus are minorities living in suburbia. And when they go in and they want to change zoning so that you have lots of problems, where they want to build low-income housing, you want something where people can aspire to be there, not something where it gets hurt badly. And that's what happens. So with suburban women, suburban men, I think they feel very strongly about what I'm doing. It's a very fair question. It's a very important question. But they fought all their lives to be there, and then all of a sudden they have something happen that changes their life and changes what they fought for so many years. John, please.
Two quick ones, if I could, Mr. President. I know you were briefed on it. Have you decided where you're going to give your acceptance speech at?
So we're looking at Gettysburg, a magnificent site. I've been there a number of times, just a magnificent site. And we're looking at the White House. And I would say it's really down to those two. The White House would be much easier from the standpoint of Secret Service and, you know, the movement of hundreds of people, as you know. I would say we love them both. I love Gettysburg, but it's this is simpler. Would be magnificent. The White House is the White House is the White House. Gettysburg is one of the great and historic sites of our country. Frankly, as far as I'm concerned, of the world. So one of those two. I'll probably be announcing it over the next week or so. Maybe.
I had a question about payroll taxes. If you permanently rescind the payroll tax, how do you pay for Social Security?
We're taking it out of the general fund. And what we'll do, what we'll be doing is If we do that, we'll get it approved, in that case by Congress, and we'll take the money from other places other than, we will not take it from Social Security in any way, shape, or form.
How do you fund it from the general fund when the general fund just incurred a debt of $2.8 trillion?
You're right, but we're going to have tremendous growth. We have tremendous growth. You take a look at what's happening here. Next year, unless somebody comes in who doesn't know what they're doing and they start raising taxes and forcing everybody to leave the country or leave their jobs and companies to close, we will have tremendous growth. You will see growth like you haven't seen in a long time. Okay,
Mr. President, since you didn't see Kamala Harris's remarks today, I wonder if we could just one thing that she said.
Sure.
She said that your refusal to get testing up and running, I'm paraphrasing, you're flip-flopping on social distancing and masks, and your delusional belief that you know better than the experts, all of that, in her words, a reason that one American dies of COVID-19 every minute. What do you think of that?
I think that's probably one of the reasons she was a terrible candidate and was forced to leave the race, because she got her facts wrong. You know, she's very bad on facts. She's very weak on facts. And just so you understand, we've done more testing than any country in the world by far. That includes India, which has 1.5 billion people. That includes China. That includes every country in the world. We've done more testing. We have better testing than any country in the world. They call, they want to know, where do we get it? How do we get it? We have better testing than any country in the world. When you do as much testing as us, however, as you understand, you develop more cases. If you tested on instead of 65 million people, which is what we've done, when you test that many people, you're going to find cases that normally you wouldn't see. If you go to Mexico and you go to other countries, you'll see they do almost no testing. They test if somebody's not feeling well. They test if somebody is symptomatic. They test very little. They test very little. We've done more testing than anybody in the world. We've done the best job of any country in the world, and that includes from making ventilators that nobody else could have done. We are the ventilator king of the world. We're supplying the whole world now in a few short months with ventilators that are very hard to produce, very expensive, very complex, very delicate, very, very important. We've done a great job. And then on top of that, when you look at the numbers, how we were impacted less than these other countries, and now you look at the explosion of countries that you would have said did such a good job, and some of them had advantages over us for obvious reasons having to do with the pandemic. But when you look at the job that we've done compared to others, we've done a great job. And I read today that she's very short on facts. I think she's going to be a big failure, and I look forward to the debate between her and Mike Pence, because I think he'll do even better against her than he did against Senator Kaine, which was a total wipeout. So we'll see how it all works out. All right, one more. Yeah, please.
Mr. President, thank you very much.
No, in the back.
Thank you. Just ask, what do you say to those critics who argue you're trying to sow distrust in democracy and deliberately trying to sabotage the post office to undermining mail-in voting, which a lot of people need?
I say the Democrats are sabotaging the post office because they're not approving $25 billion that was requested. So they're sabotaging the post office, and they're not allowing the post office to function properly, and they're certainly not allowing universal mail-in votes when they do that. But equally importantly, they're not allowing $3.5 billion in funds to do voting that they'd like to do. Therefore, all of this and all of the tremendous mistakes that were made with regard to mail-in voting, all of these tremendous mistakes, you can't even do it. I would imagine the courts, you know, this is in many courts right now, they're showing all of the disasters that have taken place just in the last short period of time, in the last 2 months, with respect to universal mail-in voting. It's just like a total catastrophe what's happening, and we can't let that happen. Go ahead real fast.
Mr. President, sure, go ahead. One is about, you had graphs about the economics of COVID, but deaths in America are still going up, whereas in Europe, right now, 0 deaths in UK, 0 deaths in France.
What's going up by cases, if you look at cases, and the cases are going up because we do so much testing and we find it, and I call it fake media gold. because we do so much more testing than any other country, and when you do all that testing, you find cases. Go ahead, Steve, real fast.
Interesting to see, I mean, filmmaker Michael Moore has this long post on it.
75 years old. We live in the mountains, so
We've taken a lot of money from China in the last year and a half that no other president has taken in. We've done things to China that nobody else has done to China, or even thought of doing it, with 25% tariffs, and taken in billions and billions of dollars, tens of billions of dollars, and given the farmers, as an example, 12 billion one year, 16 billion another year, and made the farmers extremely happy. You don't hear them complaining. They were targeted by China. But I'm very angry at China because they let this horrible disease, they let this horrible plague come into our country and come into the world. And they should have been able to stop it. They stopped it from going into China. They should have been able to stop it. So I'm very angry at China. Thank you very much.
Mr. President, it's not $400, it's $300 from the federal government. So why are you saying it's $400?
All right, you've been watching President Trump's briefing, weighing in on Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's first meeting. Also, as you heard, talking about coronavirus. We're going to break this down, and of course,
her connection to Biden through his late son, Beau, and the questions she's facing about her record as a prosecutor. President Trump also in front of the cameras late today and taking new aim at Harris, why some of his allies fear the attacks could backfire. The battle over schools, more than 1,000 students and staff in one Georgia district quarantine. It's being called the smoking gun, the new study revealing the virus can spread in the air indoors much farther than we knew. Plus the challenges for students learning English and students with special needs when remote learning is the only option. The horrific train derailment, at least 3 killed, including the operator. What caused it? A lifeline for college football after the Big Ten and Pac-12 sidelined their seasons. The major announcement today. And the twist of fate, reuniting the homecoming king and queen nearly 30 years later.
This is NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
Good evening, everyone. The brand new Biden-Harris ticket made its public debut late today. Joe Biden and running mate Senator Kamala Harris socially distanced on a stage in Delaware, where both made prepared remarks before reporters in a high school gym. Harris embracing the history of her selection, as well as her role of carrying the attack against President Trump. Our Andrea Mitchell was there.
Together for the first time since their big announcement, the Democratic ticket, the oldest major party candidate to run for president, and the first woman of color.
This morning, all across the nation, little girls woke up, especially little black and brown girls, who so often feel overlooked and undervalued in their communities. But today, just maybe, they're seeing themselves for the first time in a new way as the stuff of president and vice presidents.
Today trying to show they are a team with similar values and shared goals.
And we're experiencing a moral reckoning with racism and systemic injustice that has brought a new coalition of conscience to the streets of our country, demanding change.
After releasing a video profiling Kamala Harris, opening with that moment when Joe Biden asked her to be on the ticket.
Hi, sorry to keep you.
That's all right. You ready to go to work?
Oh my God, I'm so ready to go to work.
Why Harris? First, energy, excitement, a strong campaigner, even virtually during the pandemic. Second, her ability to rally black voters, key to any Democratic victory, especially in those battleground states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, who did not turn out in large enough numbers for Hillary Clinton. Third, the prosecutor, Harris using her skills to go after Trump and his men.
Has the president or anyone at the White House ever asked or suggested that you open an investigation of anyone? Yes or no, please, sir?
The president or anybody else.
Seems you'd remember something like that and be able to tell us.
Skills honed from her years as California's Attorney General when she forged a friendship with Joe Biden's son, Beau, who had the same job in Delaware.
I know how much Beau respected Kamala and her work. And that mattered a lot to me, to be honest with you, as I made this decision.
Bo was the kind of guy who inspired people to be a better version of themselves. He really was the best of us. And when I would ask him, where'd you get that? Where did this come from? He'd always talk about his dad.
And Biden says they're prepared for attacks from President Trump.
She's going to stand with me in this campaign, and all of us are going to stand up for her.
And Andrea joins me now. Andrea, what will the rest of this campaign look like?
They will be separated, and Biden was asked as he was leaving tonight whether they will be campaigning together, and he said it depends on what the science says. Lester?
All right, Andrea, thank you. And though Kamala Harris ran her own campaign for president, with her selection as Joe Biden's running mate, Harris is being reintroduced to the American public on a much bigger stage.
First of all, is the answer yes?
The answer is absolutely yes, Joe, and I am ready to work. I am ready to do this with you, for you.
Kamala Harris has built a career on working, fighting, and most of all, not being afraid to be the first.
I'm so proud to stand with you. And I do so mindful of all the heroic and ambitious women before me, whose sacrifice, determination, and resilience makes my presence here today even possible.
She's the daughter of immigrants who fell in love as activists during the civil rights movement. Harris's father from Jamaica, an economics professor at Stanford. Her mother left India to attend Berkeley, becoming a leading breast cancer researcher. After they divorced, Harris and little sister Maya were raised mostly by their mom. She passed away in 2009, but Harris has called her the most important influence in her life. Today, quoting her in this new Biden campaign ad.
Growing up, whenever I got upset about something, my mother would look me in the eye and ask, "So what are you going to do about it?"
Harris is now 55, a wife and stepmother, but she's often candid about how her early experiences shaped her, including perhaps the most talked about and controversial moment of her presidential run, when she criticized her now running mate's record on busing.
Growing up, my sister and I had to deal with the neighbor who told us her parents couldn't play with us because we were black. You know, there was a little girl in California.
Attend Howard University. There, she writes in her autobiography, students were taught that we were young, gifted, and black, and we shouldn't let anything get in the way of our success. She says becoming a prosecutor was her calling because she wanted to help change the system, working first in Oakland, then elected as San Francisco's district attorney, and eventually the first black woman to become Attorney General of California.
I devoted my life to making real the words carved in the United States Supreme Court, equal justice under law.
As Harris's national profile has risen, her record as a prosecutor has been both praised and criticized, some on the left chiding her for not being progressive enough. But when she returned to Washington 4 years ago as a senator, she earned a reputation for showcasing those prosecutorial skills in high-profile hearings.
Yes or no?
Well, is there a person you're talking about?
I'm asking you a very direct question, yes or no?
When Joe Biden selected Harris as his running mate yesterday, it made history in many ways. But it was also a choice with deep personal meaning for Biden because of Harris's close friendship with his late son, Bo.
I know how much Bo respected Kamala and her work, and that mattered a lot to me, to be honest with you.
The former vice president now betting Harris's decades of working, fighting, and breaking barriers will help him win the White House. From President Trump, there was new criticism of Kamala Harris today, but the president's attacks risk turning off some who supported him 4 years ago. NBC's Kristen Welker is at the White House.
Tonight, as President Trump sharpens his attacks against Senator Kamala Harris.
I watched her poll numbers go boom, 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 down to almost nothing. And she left angry, she left mad.
Some allies are sounding alarm bells about his mixed messaging. On the one hand, the president and his campaign are trying to label the former California Attorney General as being too tough on crime, while also arguing she's an anti-police leftist.
She left nobody happy when it came to law and order, which is the #1 job she had.
And some advisors think the president should stay away from personal attacks, like the one in this tweet: "The suburban housewife will be voting for me." That message, aimed at disparaging fair housing rules, already backfiring with some women in Beaver County, Pennsylvania, an area Mr. Trump won by 19 points in 2016. Kristen Stanzik voted for candidate Trump, but isn't sure this year.
I don't find myself in that suburban mom group that he's referring to.
Do you think he could be hurting his chances with voters like you by tweeting things like?
I mean, definitely. I think he needs to stop tweeting.
It's not the first time the president has struggled with how to talk about Harris. When she first launched her primary campaign,
We can reclaim American dream.
President Trump praised her, telling the New York Times, "I would say the best opening so far would be Kamala Harris," but quickly taking aim on the campaign trail.
Kamala is falling.
And when asked about Harris as a potential running mate just a few weeks ago, still, the Democrats' diverse ticket is fueling the question among some Republicans: is the president considering shaking up his own team? A top campaign advisor addressed the issue today.
Our vice president has been a fighter. He has worked every single day for the American people.
Now, President Trump is gearing up to counter-program the Democratic National Convention next week, planning campaign events in key battleground states like Minnesota, Wisconsin, Arizona, and Pennsylvania. Lester.
Kristen Welker at the White House, thank you. And the president tonight once again pushing for schools to reopen, but districts across the country are learning just how challenging that process is as more closed down.
For that might be that she had that viral moment with Vice President Biden when she went after him on stage. She saw her biggest bounce from that debate performance. That's something the Biden campaign may like in the matchup against Vice President Pence. But Judy, overall, her appeal was broad, and that is one reason she might not have advanced farther. She didn't have any niche of core voters that was really to push her ahead. That is also something maybe the Biden campaign likes in a vice presidential candidate. She appeals to many different kinds of people. One other note, Judy, a little bit off topic, but I looked into the high school that this appearance was at today, Alexis DuPont High School in Wilmington or Greenville, Delaware. And it's fascinating, Judy. This is a high school that was part of a school district in the 1970s, which sued to try and keep segregation going as the court saw it. This is a high school she likely could not have attended, but yet today this is where Kamala Harris became the first black woman to be a vice presidential nominee or any nominee on a presidential ticket for a major party.
So interesting, that part of history, which of course came up in the debates, and it's going to continue, I'm sure, to come up. Well, it certainly was a rollout like no other. We've seen a nominee bringing his running mate, and you didn't see the hands raised together or anything like what we've seen. But that's the world we live in. Daniel Bush, there in Wilmington. Lisa Desjardins here. Thank you.
Welcome.
With less than 3 months until Election Day, much of the attention has been on the presidential race. But Amna Abbas looks at how a conspiracy theory could make its way into the halls of Congress after the election.
America's the greatest country in the world.
On Tuesday, Marjorie Taylor Greene won the Republican runoff in Georgia's 14th congressional district.
I'm a conservative Republican.
It's an overwhelmingly GOP district, so she's favored to win in November.
We have an Islamic invasion into our government offices.
But after Politico uncovered Greene's previous Islamophobic, anti-Semitic, and racist remarks about black people, GOP leaders distanced themselves, condemning her words as appalling, disgusting, and bigoted. But Republican leaders remain largely silent about Greene's support for a far-right conspiracy theory known as QAnon, support she professed in a 2017 video she deleted before her campaign launch.
Q is a patriot. He is someone that is very much loves his country, and he's on the same page as us, and he is very pro-Trump, okay?
QAnon first emerged in the months after President Trump took office, starting on fringe internet message boards before spreading to social media. Adherents allege, among other things, that the president is the target of so-called deep state actors, high-ranking officials plotting against him. The conspiracy quickly took off, and the president's supporters latched on to the mysterious Q. Signs and t-shirts appeared at Trump's campaign rallies. Last year, the FBI labeled the movement a potential domestic terror threat.
I stand with President Trump. I stand with Q and the team. Thank you, Anons, and thank you, Patriots.
But now, QAnon has firmly taken root in the 2020 campaign trail.
Honestly, everything that I've heard of Q, I hope that this is real.
Some congressional candidates, like Lauren Boebert in Colorado, promoted the conspiracy theory to friendly media outlets before later calling QAnon fake news. According to Media Matters, a left-leaning watchdog group, 20 candidates, all Republicans except one independent, with varying levels of support for QAnon conspiracies, have advanced to November's general election. And now, Marjorie Taylor Greene's name will be on the ballot as well. To look more closely at the rise and spread of the QAnon conspiracy on the campaign trail, I'm joined by Travis View, co-host of the QAnon Anonymous podcast. Travis, welcome to the NewsHour. You have been following the QAnon conspiracy theory and its followers for a very long time. Let's start with the basics, though, for those who haven't been. Just to explain to us, where and how did the QAnon conspiracy begin?
The QAnon conspiracy theory originated on 4chan in October of 2017, though it has its origins in Pizzagate. The basic premise is that a group of high-level military intelligence officials close to President Trump, QAnon followers believe, are sending out secret coded messages on these image boards about this great grand battle of good versus evil, in which Trump and what they call the Q team are working to destroy a global cabal of Satan-worshipping pedophiles, which the QAnon community believes is controlling everything. And that includes politicians, entertainment, and the media.
And what is the end game? If you're someone who believes in this conspiracy theory, what do you believe will happen as a result of all this?
The QAnon community is awaiting two big events. One of them is called the Storm, and this is supposed to be a great mass arrest event in which over 100,000 people from the highest levels of power and entertainment are arrested and face a great day of reckoning. The other event that they're waiting for is called the Great Awakening. And this is basically an event in which everyone realizes that QAnon is right the whole time. And that would allow us to enter into a great, grand new utopian age.
So Travis, what you've just laid out seems so obviously irrational that a lot of reasonable people might just dismiss it, and yet it has picked up real speed in recent years, right? I mean, it was reported just recently that Facebook found thousands of groups and pages with millions of followers and members supporting QAnon. So what has helped to fuel this idea so well?
You know, it's a really appealing story. You happen to feel really disenfranchised, and you want to believe that the world is about to change in a really important revolutionary way. And it's also appealing because it allows the QAnon followers to believe that they can take part in this great grand revolutionary change. They think that they're basically conducting an information war, so that by going on social media and posting QAnon memes and then spreading these QAnon conspiracy theories, they can help usher in this great awakening. And so it sounds ludicrous, and it is, but this story has a lot of appeal to people who might otherwise feel like they have no voice in the political system.
Travis, the fact that President Trump has been retweeting some of these conspiracy theories, that congressional candidates are now saying that they support these ideas and are then winning, likely ending up in Congress. What does all of that say to you about the potency of this particular conspiracy theory?
Well, there is some historical precedent for a conspiratorial movement gaining a significant share of power in Congress. All the way back in 1833, there was a party called the Anti-Masonic Party, which was dedicated to the proposition that the Freemasons were controlling the world. And they gained 10% of the House of Representatives. You know, there's always been an undercurrent of conspiracy thinking and paranoia in American politics, and occasionally it can rise up and actually get some actual significant political power. And so this is just something we're seeing again.
You mentioned the Pizzagate conspiracy theory back in 2016. We should mention that has not really gone away. It tamped down a little bit, but it's resurfaced again recently. What happens with the QAnon conspiracy theory? Do you see a point at which this goes away?
No, absolutely not. This is something that has started very small a couple years ago, and it has only accelerated and gained in popularity and gained in speed. So if you go by the trajectory, this is something that will almost certainly be with us for at least a generation and probably longer.
That is Travis Few, co-host of the QAnon Anonymous podcast. Thanks so much, Travis.
Thank you for having me.
As schools are preparing for the start of another year, many districts say they are not ready to bring students back into the buildings because of the spread of COVID in their communities. But President Trump is dialing up the pressure on them to do so. He tried to make the case for that again today at the White House. Kellyanne Conway is counselor to President Trump, and she joins us now. Kellyanne Conway, welcome back to the NewsHour. As we were saying, the president is trying to get the schools to open up physically, but this comes at the very same time we are learning that there's been a 90% increase in the number of children diagnosed or with this infection, something like 100,000 children diagnosed at the end of July. Now we have the American Academy of Pediatrics and the Association of Children's Hospitals saying, please hold off on in-person schools. How does that square with what the president is saying?
Judy, our message today in our discussion with parents, teachers, scientists and doctors and students themselves was very clear. Let's reopen safely. The word safely is critically important here because, as you point out, roughly 50% or so of the nation's students are not returning to a physical structure on day one of the regular school year this fall. So what does that mean? It means that those that are still have low infection rates, knowing that children are still at relatively low risk from contracting, that 99.95% of the COVID fatalities are adults, and of course the average age is 78. But having said that, people are very concerned, and we wanted to make sure that we amplified and acknowledged those concerns and came up with 8 different things the president is announcing tonight that we think will help schools to safely reopen. Among other things, the president is reminding that through the CARES Act, we've allocated 13.
Your lines flowing. In bathrooms. Right now, we are offering
grassroots fundraising day of the campaign, more than double our previous record. And in doing so, we set a single-day record for online political fundraising.
Classroom. When studies are showing that kids who aren't eating their breakfast in the morning and then, maybe they're not getting adequate lunch, it's hard for them to really stay focused and to learn what.
Senator from Wisconsin is also actively working to denigrate Joe Biden. Are they in cahoots?
And I want to let you listen to Joe Biden talking about the reaction in terms of fundraising.
Sure.
Yesterday, we had our best grassroots fundraising day of the campaign, more than double our previous record. And in doing so, we set a single-day record for online political fundraising. And I think I know why.
Typically, African Americans have, other than the Obama campaign, when you saw people like throwing, barbecues and raising $10 a person to attend, there's always been sort of an idea inside of political fundraising that African Americans are not as prolific in terms of givers. Do you think that will change in this cycle?
Oh, absolutely, I do. I'm not surprised by that. And I think that that's going to continue. And I think it's going to be African Americans and everybody else. People know what's at stake. I mean, Joy, every day I think about the fact that over 160,000 Americans are dead. The role of commander-in-chief, the first job is to keep the people safe. And we have a commander-in-chief that doesn't even care. So we have to think about this election. We need to think about it in honor of all those souls that were lost. Many probably didn't need to die. And we also need to think about Representative John Lewis. And we need to vote, but we need to vote really early. because they're doing everything they can, I believe, to mess with the vote because they know he's lost support. And I don't want to see them mess with the post office and that wind up compromising our ability to win this election.
Yeah, absolutely. Donald Trump called Kamala Harris nasty and angry. He went for all the typical tropes. I won't even force you to listen to him, but I'm going to let you listen to Ronna Romney McDaniel, who's the chairman of the Republican Party, chairwoman. Here she is.
Joe Biden made it very clear, I'm going to pick a woman. He didn't say I'm going to pick the best candidate. He said I'm going to pick a woman. And he's doing this to get the woman vote. Joe Biden picked her because she's a woman, but she does not appeal to moms and women across this country who want to see the American dream continue and don't want to give health care to illegal aliens and stop deportations. And least of all, we don't want to see the police defunded.
Well, I guess it tells you what kind of moms that she knows, but you're witness, as a prosecutor might say.
Exactly right. I mean, I think that that's ridiculous. I believe that Senator Harris is going to appeal to the rainbow. She's going to appeal around the country. And also because how could they possibly talk about moms when you have a president who is not taking care of the American people? I think she's going to do a fine job. I think she will appeal, and the fundraising was just an example. The only thing, Joy, though, is that it's going to be so frustrating this year because we all are going to have to deal with this campaigning through Zoom. So I know I'm going to be Zooming day and night for the next 80 plus days.
I know, we're all getting to know this technology. Well, I will also note that as you are a Californian, Senator Harris is also the first nominee from west of the Rocky Mountains. That's wild to think only Republicans have nominated Californians. So interesting. Good, a big win for California. Congresswoman Karen Bass, a big win for us having you on tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Non-home advisor. So, elected, whether it is Biden or Trump.
Kamala, as you all know, is smart. She's tough. She's experienced. She's a proven fighter for the backbone of this country.
Thanks to
our surrounds and safety tub.
You can see the dry conditions in southeast Kettleland as
bad things about Joe Biden, but those things seem to just call more attention to him.
Well, let me talk briefly about Joe Biden. I was teaching for the last few years at the University of Pennsylvania, which Joe has a relationship with, and I was teaching a journalism seminar, and I invited him into my class of about 25 students, and he just blew the doors off the thing. And these kids responded to him and to his force of intellect and passion in a way that surprised me. And he said at the end to them as he was on his way out the door, he said, look, you 25 kids, you're at an Ivy League school, but don't think you can isolate yourself from the changes in America and your responsibility to deal with it. You can't build a wall high enough. You can't make enough money. You can't do anything to avoid your responsibility to embrace America. And I think by picking Kamala Harris, he showed that. She's dynamite. She's going to be the defining story of this campaign. And Joe, by inference, will be the second defining story because he's the guy who played in the band with Barack Obama. And he's the guy who then turned around and picked a woman of color to be his helpmate. It's a story of America today. It's a story of America of the future. And if you think the suburban women of America are going to reject that, I think you're totally wrong. We go through periods of division and unity. We're headed into a period of unity that I think Joe and Kamala have a chance to achieve.
Well, and you know, Jason, just from a historic standpoint, there's a certain LBJ JFK feeling about the ticket, right? Where you did have, you know, Lyndon Johnson to balance out JFK, who represented this new generation. And that's kind of how this feels, right? It does feel like, you know, Biden has given himself an LBJ moment here.
Yeah, I mean, they balance each other out. They make a lot of sense one way or another. For once, we don't have this sort of Batman and Robin situation. This is more like Storm and Dora Milaje. I mean, these are two functional people who could both actually be president, and that's something we can actually be excited about as opposed to somebody who's a junior partner.
Yeah, indeed.
Well,
Jason Johnson, Howard Feynman, thank you both, my friends. Appreciate it. That is tonight's readout. And All In with Chris Hayes.
Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson tonight. There are a lot of things you want to know about Kamala Harris, and we plan to tell you. But the first thing to know about Harris is that in just a few months, she could run your country. If Joe Biden wins the presidential election, Kamala Harris effectively will become the president of the United States. Everyone knows that. Democratic donors understand it best of all. America's big banks have long controlled Joe Biden for years in the Senate, for decades. He faithfully did their bidding. And in return, they sent him money. They still do. In fact, far more money than they send to the incumbent president. Now, the banks were nervous for a moment about the prospect that Biden might pick Stacey Abrams, so they were thrilled when he chose Harris instead. On Twitter, they cheered the news. The consulting group Signum Global sent a bulletin telling its clients to calm down and rest easy. The Democratic ticket is under control, our control. Last night, in fact, the DNC hosted a fundraiser with lobbyists for Credit Suisse, Raytheon, Western Union, and ExxonMobil. So all is well on Wall Street. But how about the rest of the country? Actual voters have never shown a lot of enthusiasm for Kamala Harris. In fact, Harris was so remarkably unpopular in the Democratic primaries that despite non-stop media cheerleading, she was forced to drop out before the first votes were even cast.
Ready to get to work rebuilding this nation. I asked Kamala to be the last voice in the room. To always tell me the truth, which she will. Challenge my assumptions if she disagrees. Ask the hard questions. They're seeing themselves for the first time in a new way as the stuff of president and vice presidents.
Senator Harris also spoke to the history being made with her nomination, but much of her time was devoted to attacking President Trump and his administration's overall poor management of the country, promising fundamental change.
Everything we care about, our economy, our health, our children, the kind of country we live in, it's all on the line. We're reeling from the worst public health crisis in a century. The president's mismanagement of the pandemic has plunged us into the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. And we're experiencing a moral reckoning with racism and systemic injustice that has brought a new coalition of conscience to the streets of our country, demanding change.
Visible on his desk. So the Democratic nominee for president is unable to speak to his running mate without assistance. Here's how it went.
Hi, sorry to keep you.
No, that's all right. You ready to go to work?
Oh my God, I'm so ready to go to work.
First of all, is the answer yes?
The answer is absolutely yes, Joe, and I am ready to work. I am ready to do this with you, for you. I'm just deeply honored, and I'm very excited.
That is just too great. We're keeping that on a loop in the tape department. I'm sorry to keep you, Kamala Harris says. Not since Elizabeth Warren pretended to drink a beer with her husband has an exchange that fake been captured on video. There are Mexican soap operas more authentic than what you just saw. And yet you still have to wonder how many times did they have to reshoot that scene before Joe Biden got his lines right. Let's try it again, Mr. Vice President. Warm personal conversation, take 11. It's going to be a deeply amusing 3 months. Do your best to enjoy it. But as you do enjoy it, pay attention also to what Harris says she believes. She'll try to say not much about what she believes. Public policy is the last thing the Biden campaign wants to talk about. The plan is to skate by on Harris's historic status, combined with, of course, relentless attacks on the incumbent. The New York Times, for one, is on board. The Times doesn't think you should worry about what Harris plans to do to your country if she's elected. Moments after Harris joined the Biden campaign, the paper declared her a, quote, pragmatic moderate. So why do they feel the need to sum her up that way? Well, obviously, to send a very clear signal to everyone else in the business. At this late stage in American journalism, the New York Times exists primarily as an assignment editor for producers at CNN. If the Times declares it, the 26-year-old Vassar grads who decide what's on cable television faithfully repeat it. So expect to hear quite a bit about Harris's pragmatic moderation in coming weeks. You probably already are. But the question is, that is worth considering, is Kamala Harris actually a moderate? Well, let's see. Here she is last year calling for Congress to change the Constitution of the United States so that 16-year-olds can vote. As you watch it, for the sake of argument, pretend that Harris means what she's saying. And then ask yourself, what kind of person could make an argument like that in public without blushing? Well, only someone who'd never actually met a 16-year-old.
Do you believe that Americans should have the right to vote at age 16?
I'm really interested in having that conversation. I have to tell you that. I think that there is no question that if we are looking at what is going on in our country, we are putting more responsibilities on people at a younger age, and the larger number of people that we can involve in the electoral process, I think the more robust it would be.
There is no question, Harris says, that turning the government over to 10th graders would make the country more robust. For sure. No more school, free dab pens for everyone, endless possibilities for more robustness. Does Harris really believe?
Better than any president in American history. Is anyone surprised Donald Trump has a problem with a strong woman or strong women across the board?
Well, shortly after that event, I spoke with the chairwoman of the Congressional Black Caucus, Congresswoman Karen Bass, a former contender for the vice presidential slot herself. Bass was excited about the nomination of her fellow Californian and spoke about the attacks on Kamala Harris that you just heard Joe Biden mention from President Trump. Congresswoman Bass, seeing Vice President Biden and Senator Harris together today for the first time since the announcement, I'm wondering, having been on the short list yourself, what your impressions were?
Well, I thought it was very exciting. I think it's an exciting moment in our history. You know, when she ran for the presidency, that was historic. And so now that she's going to be our next VP, because I am positive about that, I am enjoying this moment in history.
What do you think, I mean, as a historical moment, what it means for the country and also for the dynamics of this campaign?
Well, you know, after 3.5 years of such a divisive president, of a president that is clearly has just made racist remarks on a regular basis, to see our ticket, to see the unity of Vice President Biden and Senator Harris on that stage together, to me, it was electric. And I think it's going to excite people. We're 80 plus days away and they can't go by fast. So I just believe that it's going to really energize folks in the way they need to be. And we have to turn out and vote early because there's so many shenanigans going on the other side to suppress our vote. And so I'm hoping that this will add to the momentum.
Do you worry?
Confident and comfortable that she knows what she's doing, that she's ready to do the job, and she's already been vetted. She's been through a presidential campaign. She's a mom, she's a wife. She has a tradition that we love. That means immigrants with history who come to do well in this country. She's a black woman. She's a Southeast Asian heritage. And I don't know what else they can try to attack. What I will say is that this team, this unity team, puts them in a box. It makes them look nasty and small, inadequate in terms of their policy offerings. And I'm going to ask the question, what are they running on, Allie? What are they running on? Yeah. We know that we're running on opportunity and to build back better. And if this nation is crumbling, we need to build back better.
Congresswoman, Joe Biden, when he launched his campaign, talked about the soul of America. He said it again today. He talked back then about Charlottesville and that sort of element of disunity and discord in this country. But since then, so much more has happened, and social inequity and injustice has really become the big issue of our time. How, for people who have been affected by this, people of color, women of color, black women, how does Kamala Harris as vice president fundamentally change their outlook?
You know, it's a very painful experience. Those of us in public life, those who are not in public life, who run into this shameful aspect of America's culture, and it's very narrow. It's very narrow, but it exists. Look at our social media, and you will see the taunts and the accusations and the bad words that are used against black women and others of color. And so for us, if I may take a moment, there was a great deal of emotion because her selection by Joe Biden affirmed us that we finally had gained status, and also the ugliness was behind us, or it was a narrow aspect of American life. That the life that we have now is that we are all Americans with a seat at the table, and that if we happen to be different, we are now being recognized as having the ability to contribute and to give value to our place here and our service to this country. That's what Kamala represents, and it represents an overcoming of any Confederate statute that the administration wants to throw in our face, any ugly comments being made by candidates that are now running, putting 4 black girls and a woman on a hard payment in Aurora, Colorado, treating them with the utmost of disdain and disgrace. It takes the sting of that pain to be able to say that there will be those in the White House, including Vice President Biden, that will listen to the softest of voices, and will be listening to the voices as far away from Washington as possible. It makes a difference. It is painful to hear attacks that we have all seen and heard, but it is a light at the end of the tunnel to see this great team that we're dealing with. Biden, Harris, they're ready to do the job, and I think many people have been in pain seeing a whole different perspective.
Remarkable rise, as Nia Malika had pointed out there, and as you pointed out, Nia, she is a fighter.
She's smart, she's quick on her feet, she's articulate.
One of the pluses for Kamala Harris' candidacy is her personal magnetism.
This is a phenomenal pick tonight.
People wanted to be around her. There was a charisma, a fascination, for lack of a better word, Anderson, a bit of celebrity surrounding Kamala Harris.
I immediately understood why people in California saw her as the female Obama.
She's remarkable. Really, the question is, if she gives a campaign speech from a position of elevation, is it a Sermon on the Mount? News at 11. The anchors on CNN, of course, were especially supportive. In fact, Kamala Harris is the only politician their boss, the tiny but secretive Jeff Zucker, has ever publicly endorsed. When she ran for Attorney General in the state of California, Zucker said this, quote, "Kamala is not just important for the city of San Francisco, the state of California, but for the entire country," end quote. So according to Jeff Zucker, Kamala Harris is that important, existentially important, spiritually important, probably too important to cover as you would a mere politician who just wants to take over your country. So stop asking questions, obey. Tammy Bruce hosts Get Tammy Bruce on Fox Nation. We're always happy to have her on. Tammy, thanks so much for coming. So, look, I disagree with Kamala Harris on a whole bunch of different things, but in a normal year, you could kind of point that out, and we would have a debate about those things, and I think the country benefits from that. The system they've set up right now is that Kamala Harris gets to say whatever she wants, but you can't complain or else you're kicked off the internet. How does this work?
Well, and it's interesting. It's not just our perception that this has happened. My column that is hitting Fox News tomorrow morning deals with a memo that Democrat operatives, women with as surrogates for the Biden campaign, Hillary Rosen, a Clinton operative, NARAL, Planned Parenthood, etc., created an ad hoc group called We Have Her Back. And they sent this missive to media organizations telling them that if there is a critique that they don't like, it's going to be racist and sexist. And they're going to call it out, and they're going to be watching. And then they created a list of things that you weren't really allowed to ask about because these were forbidden, and that includes or even question whether or not someone was capable of leadership.
and you shouldn't show pictures of this woman, whoever the nominee would be now, Ms. Harris, Senator Harris, in any kind of an emotional position, like if she was yelling or looked emotional, because that is a stereotype of women. You also were not supposed to talk about appearance or even history or background, even if the candidate liked to talk about her background. You can do none of those things. Now, and what this is meant to do, of course, is to make bookers, producers, anchors, writers afraid of saying or asking anything about her or being critical at all, lest you be in this environment declared a racist or a sexist, because then, of course, as we know, you will be canceled. You will likely not ever work again. But they're trying to create, Tucker, you know, they've got Biden in a literal basement. They're now trying to create a virtual bunker for Senator Harris at this point. I don't know what they're afraid of.
This is someone who seeks to control the country and our children's future, the future of our nation. Don't we have an absolute moral right under the Constitution to say what we think of her plans? It's hard to believe the media would go along with censorship in a moment like this.
Well, even more so. The real sexism is that memo itself. They are saying that a woman, and particularly a woman of color, has to be treated like an infant, that she is too fragile or too weak to be able to handle sometimes the unfairness that will happen in the arena. They say when they talk about not being able to talk to her about, or whoever the nominee would be, now we know Ms. Harris, about appearance. What have they been doing to Donald Trump for the last 4 years? His weight, his hair, his hands, joking about the supposed color of his skin, and yet none of that is allowed for the woman. As a woman who thinks other women should have power, we earn it. You can become elected, but you become a leader when you can face the reality of the arena. And now the Democrats are saying, don't talk to Biden because he can't handle it, but don't you dare look really at Kamala Harris, because that's a little bit too weakness, a lot of weakness there. It's very strange.
The most cynical thing I've ever seen. We're not playing along, and you're not either, so I appreciate that. Tammy, thank you.
Thank you, Tucker.
Liberty, 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 liberty. If you're at home thinking about your financial plan, so are we. Prudential helps one.
Idea. This is not just a pro-Trump philosophy. This is a dangerous and violent conspiracy theory, which has, as we know, led to real-world violence, including at least one murder.
Has the Republican Party had anything to say about this, that maybe they don't want these people running under their banner?
There have been a few Republicans that have come out and said QAnon is crazy. It shouldn't have any place in our party. And then when that happens, like today, our congressional nominee out of Georgia, she immediately jumped on this and said, how dare you attack me? You know, any Republican who attacks me is a rhino. And, you know, what's important to know here, too, is that a lot of the QAnon base, a lot of the QAnon believers are also evangelical Christians. So it is kind of a messianistic worldview and conspiracy. So a lot of those groups overlap. So which is what we might be seeing out of Green, who's also a very conservative Christian. So that equals the Republican base. So while you know, the Republican establishment might not ever come out and say, oh yeah, QAnon sounds pretty legit, maybe we should listen to it. If they go against QAnon, or if they come out and outright deny it or rebuke it, then what that does is it alienates a core portion of their base. Facebook has told us how large that group is, but these people have been people that have been consistently coming to Trump rallies and smaller GOP rallies for state lawmakers and for, you know, U.S. politicians on the state level. So we don't expect to hear anything about it soon from them.
Brandy, this is just wild. Honestly, I've been listening to you tell stories for the last few years, and this one is uniquely wild. I encourage you to follow Brandy on Twitter so that you can get up to speed on this. Brandy Zabrosny, thanks for joining us tonight. That is all in on this Wednesday night. The Rachel Maddow Show starts right now. Good evening, Rachel.
Good evening, Ali. Thank you, my friend. Much appreciated. And thanks to at home for joining us today. Vice President Biden today recounted the story, which he has told before, but he recounted the story of what he agreed with President Obama when President Obama asked Biden to be his running mate in 2008. Now, Biden has told this story before. It is sort of
administration that has had real consequences in the lives of thousands and thousands and 160,000 who've died, and all of their families who've been affected, and the disruption of our economy and the divisions that we've seen, the racial strife. We need leaders who can bring us together, and I am confident that those two will be able to do just that. And our country, I think, is hungry for that right now.
Do you worry about, the days ahead? I think, 85 plus days, 90 days or so, about this kind of campaigning. I mean, it's obviously unlike anything that we have seen in our lifetimes, because of social distancing, things like that. It's if people want to volunteer, normally, they can get involved. People want to be involved in campaigns. It's, I'm sure campaigns want people to be involved, but it's a different kind of involvement. How do you see this actually playing out?
Well, the campaign is going to have to be creative. And fortunately, I know many of the young superstars and not so young superstars who are working on the campaign, and they will get creative. They're going to use social media. They're going to use technology as a strength and as an advantage to get our message out. I will tell you what I do worry about. I don't worry about their creativity. I worry about the fact that I know that we're going to see a lot of horrendous language directed primarily at Senator Harris, whether it's sexist or racist. You know that a group of women sent a letter last week really challenging the media to say, ask yourself the question, would you describe a man in the same way as you're describing the nominee? And we put the letter out, Anderson, ahead of the selection because we were already beginning to see signs of discrimination and racist and sexist tropes. And we wanted to call it out and put a marker down. Later tonight, there will be a letter by about over 200 women leaders from around the country of all ages supporting Senator Harris's selection wholeheartedly, enthusiastically, saying vote for her. But we also are going to say we're going to check people who come at her on anything other than substance. She is more than willing, in fact, looking forward to a debate on substance. Do not come at her with what we see as the traditional way of attacking women, stripping them down, calling them names like mean and nasty, when we know that the intention is to diminish them. And all we want is an even playing field. That's what we're going to demand on her behalf.
It is fascinating that President Trump continues to use that word nasty in relationship to strong women.
Yes, it is quite old school, old-fashioned, and outdated, and I think irritating to women. I also think it's irritating when he says what suburban housewives are going to do. I think suburban housewives can make up their own mind about what they're going to do, and I don't think that they're worried about black people moving next door to them. I think they're worried about whether they can send their children back to school safely. I think they're worried about the people in their family who've come down with the COVID because they've been getting mixed messages from the government, and governors have been forced to go on their own and pay expensive amounts of money for equipment that should be coordinated at the federal level. They're worried about losing their jobs. They're worried about their livelihood. There's so much that people who live in the suburbs are worrying about, and I think what President Trump brought up was intended, again, to create a racial divide. It was intended to send a message that was not at all subtle, dividing us along racial lines, and we're going to see the same thing along gender lines. And I'm just here to say that there is going to be an enormous pushback on all of that.
Yeah, I mean, the idea of, he used the term suburban housewives, and then, as if it wasn't obvious enough, said, and Cory Booker, a black man, is going to be in charge of it.
Exactly. It's not subtle anymore. And I think part of what he's trying to do is to appeal, Anderson, to a shrinking base. And I don't think that that's going to work, but I'm also worried about the effect it's having on our country. All the more reason why we need the leadership of Vice President Biden and Senator Harris.
Valerie Jarrett, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thanks, Anderson. Have a great night.
You too. I want to bring in someone who knows Senator Harris very well. She's Beth Foster Gale. Her late husband, Tyrone Gale, was a press secretary for Senator Harris. Thank you so much, Beth, for being with us, and I'm so sorry for the loss of your husband. When you saw Senator Harris speaking today as vice presidential candidate, what would that have meant to Tyrone, and what did it mean to you?
Anderson, first, thank you so much for having me on the show tonight. It's a real honor to be here, and it's an honor to share part of Tyrone's story. I think it's sort of indescribable to what it would have meant to Tyrone. Tyrone deeply believed in Senator Harris and her leadership, and he would have given anything to be a part of this moment and see her elevated to this position, which, we all know she would be an incredible vice president.
What was it about her what did Tyrone see in her? He went to work for her as a freshman senator.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Tyrone, it was coming off the loss on the Clinton campaign. He had worked for Secretary Clinton and had the opportunity to start in Senator Harris's office in January of 2017. And he, Tyrone is this relentless optimist, and he believed that Senator Harris was someone that we needed in this era. She was someone that could take the fight to Trump. And Tyrone believed deeply in representation. As a black man, he really believed that nothing in this country can change until the people in power look like the people that they represent. And so, getting the opportunity to work for a black woman, especially in this moment, was a lifelong dream of his. Tyrone was the son of Jamaican immigrants, much like Senator Harris. And so, getting to work with someone that had his shared life experience and brought that to the policies and the work that she did was an amazing experience for Tyrone.
I love seeing your wedding photos, by the way. I mean, they're so beautiful. Senator Harris has spoken about Tyrone's legacy, and she described him it was just lovely. She said, for Tyrone, nothing was too small to do or too big to take on. He did this work tirelessly, always with a smile or a kind gesture. He never lost faith in our ability to do good for the people in this country.
Yeah, I mean, hearing those words, they make me a little teary. That was Tyrone to a T. Whether it was sort of the dark days of the Trump administration or, when he was fighting his own battle with cancer, he always believed that tomorrow was going to be better. And he instilled that belief in everyone around him, to the point sometimes of annoyance. But it was just this wonderful quality that he had.
You both saw a side of Senator Harris that really, most Americans don't get to, especially in tough times. How would you describe her when the cameras aren't on?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Tyrone, a few months after he went to work for Senator Harris, his colon cancer came back. He had been in remission and it came back. And I vividly remember when he told Senator Harris about this. And, she knows all too well about this experience. Her mother passed away from colon cancer. And so, she knew this journey and this fight that Tyrone was going to have to face. And she found so many ways to pick him up during his cancer battle. She would, tell him how handsome he looked, even when he lost his hair and his suits were baggy. She would call him to the point where Tyrone said, she checked in on him more than some members of his family. And she just, she found a way to treat him with so much compassion and love. But also held him to a really high standard, which Tyrone wanted and appreciated. He knew that, this was his life's work, and he didn't want her to let up on him or go easy on him.
Yeah.
If I may, there's a story I want to share. I don't talk about it very often. It's a little bit difficult for me to talk about, but it's about the night that Tyrone died. Tyrone's death was relatively sudden, although we had a few hours to kind of prepare. He was hospitalized at Memorial Sloan Kettering Hospital in New York City. And so we let friends and family know the end was near, and word reached Senator Harris. And she dropped everything in the middle of, congressional work period and flew up to New York City to be with us. And she, unobtrusively came into the hospital room. She held Tyrone's hand. She told funny stories about him. And, she said goodbye. And she hugged me just as everything in my entire world was falling apart. And looked deep in my eyes and told me that she would have my back forever. and it is a moment I will never forget for as long as I live. It's not an easy thing to go through an experience like that. It's not something I would wish on my worst enemy, but Senator Harris volunteered to be there, and she volunteered to share that moment with us. You know, for someone who she hadn't even known that long, but that's the passion that she has.
Wow. Well, it's also a testament to your husband and the loyalty that he engendered in others. I got to go, but I know you set up a scholarship fund in Tyrone's name to help others, more young Black Americans to get into politics. How can people find out information about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you Google the Tyrone Gale Scholars Program, you'll find out some information, or go to galenation.com, and it is a fantastic program. It's changing the lives of Black students.
And that's Gayle.
Yes.
All right. Awesome. Hey, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I'm so sorry for your loss, but thank you for sharing some of Tyrone with us tonight.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Beth Foster Gale. Coming up, the diversity of the Democratic Party versus President Trump's rhetoric on race. That discussion with Dr. Cornel West. Also, we'll delve with
living in the Nile Valley at that time.
Steamer, we love homes. It's why we started cleaning them over 70 years ago and why we still continue today. Whatever home means to you, we're ready when you are to make sure your space is clean and that you and the ones you care about most are safe.
If you suffer from muscle cramps in your legs and feet, TheraWorks Relief can help. With daily application, this fast-acting foam is clinically proven to prevent muscle cramps before they start.
Get TheraWorks Relief today. Available in stores everywhere.
Hey there, Robert Larson here. You know, with SimpliSafe, you get comprehensive, professionally monitored home security without having to leave your house or have anyone to come install it. You simply order it online, it gets delivered to your door, and you can set it up yourself in just a few minutes. Imagine that. So take it from an expert. Get SimpliSafe and protect your home, your family, and anything else you need to keep
out of their hands, deny them care, deny them.
From universities like the University of Illinois, Yale, and the University of...
You know what I mean? It's time to go. You've done your damage. But we can't be under any illusion. When Biden and Harris get in there, if they still tied to Wall Street, still tied to the militarism, Africa, if they still tied to not dealing with quality public education, if they're still tied to their same old neoliberal elites, then we're just going to have another slow disaster rather than a quick catastrophe. With Trump, you got a quick catastrophe. He's got to go. That's why I myself, even as a radical, I just want Trump people to know I'm a radical. My dear sister Harris is not a radical. She is she's a centrist and a moderate. I love the sister. You know, she's my AKA sister and everything. But at the same time, I recognize that when it comes to serious class struggles that are going on, the class war of the bosses against workers, she hasn't always been on the side of the workers. Neither has Biden. Neither has Biden.
What's interesting because
Biden linked to the major mass incarceration regime in the modern world. He helped create that, you know what I mean? So that we have to tell the truth about even those we vote for. That's why I don't endorse them. I vote for them because I try to stay true to Curtis Mayfield's music. When he's talking about moving on up, he's talking about integrity, honesty, decency. He's talking about vision. He's talking about courage. He's talking about generosity. He's not just talking about winning the next election. And see, it's in our musicians and our artists that they set the standards. And when they played Curtis, I said, ooh, they messing with a genius from Chicago now. They messing with a great black musical tradition now. So this is not a plaything. And yet I do think at this moment we've got to push for those two, even though I love my Green Party folk and I love my movement for People's Party that we're going to be wrestling with Nick. Because in the end, I don't think the Democratic Party is going to be strong enough as an institution to really follow through on the kind of things that William Barber and the others are talking about in terms of fighting poverty and keeping alive the legacy of Martin King Luther King.
It is. I mean, there was something about seeing her speak today. When you think about the history of the Democratic Party and how the Democratic Party has depended on Black Americans as its backbone, maybe taken for granted, and particularly Black women. And I think for who have not gotten their due in the civil rights movement and today.
Absolutely. In fact, the Black freedom movement has been the leaven in the American democratic loaf. The loaf could not expand without the Black freedom movement, because our freedom fighters have always said, we fight first for those on the chocolate side of town, and then it spills over. Just like Curtis Mayfield's music, it spills over and touches the soul of everybody. Democratic Party did that from the 30s thereafter. Black folk did that for the Republican Party after Lincoln. So in that regard, the best of the American tradition has been the best of the Black freedom struggle, and yet we can't settle just for symbol. The symbolic blow against white supremacy, the symbolic blow against male supremacy, magnificent. Let's see the substance.
He wanted her, just like he was for Obama, to be that last voice in the room, to be the one that he listened to, that would have his back.
Senator Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota ran her own strong Democratic campaign for president. Senator, I really appreciate you being here tonight. I know that one of the things you're working on in the Senate right now is the issue of protecting the Postal Service, protecting vote by mail. As this evolves over the next few days, we'd love to have you back over the next few days to talk specifically about that, because it seems like that's really coming to a head.
I'll take you up on it with Postmaster DeJoy, or as I call him, Postmaster No Joy for anyone looking for their mail. And so we've got to really get this done, Rachel. You can't have more delays. They've got to come back to the table so we can work on an agreement and get the funding we need for our elections, for our states, as well as the Postal Service. Thank you.
Senator Klobuchar, thank you. All right, we've still got a lot to get to tonight. We are also, as I mentioned at the top of the show, we're going to be speaking with another top contender for Biden's vice presidential choice, Obama National Security Advisor Susan Rice, who was reportedly in contention for the position right until the very, very last. We're going to be speaking with Susan Rice. We've got lots more ahead. Stay with us. That schools must open up in August violates the state constitution, which guarantees Floridians the right to safe and secure public education. But they're asking a judge to decide. They're asking a judge to weigh in and block that order. Well, tomorrow morning, a state judge in Tallahassee is going to hold a hearing on that lawsuit, that potentially hugely consequential lawsuit. We will keep you posted. Stay with us.
Don't just think about where you're headed this summer. And now that you can lease or buy a new Lincoln remotely or in person, discovering that feeling has never been more effortless. The Lincoln Summer Invitation Sales Event is here.
I'm a performer. Always have been and always.
And stop overpaying for car insurance.
Let me ask you.
Hot.
No, there's no space there. Maybe you were here?
And I was able to complete those short courses, 5 to 6 weeks, and then move on to the next until I reached.
That's a lot of storage.
Perfect.
You're welcome.
I love it. How did you do all this?
Wayfair.
Biggest fundraising day, the Biden campaign now saying they raised $26 million in the 24 hours after they announced Kamala Harris would be on the ticket. They then raised another $9.6 million tonight at a fundraiser. Off to the races. That does it for us tonight. We will see you again tomorrow. Now it's time for the last word with Lawrence O'Donnell. Good evening, Lawrence.
Good evening, Rachel. I was fascinated to hear you discussing the vetting process with Susan Rice because I've had private conversations with people who were through it, not this time, but in previous cycles, all senators, and they all hated it. And one of the reasons I realized they hated it is elected officials don't ever go through a vetting process. But Susan Rice had gone through the vetting process multiple times before for administration jobs, and so she was completely accustomed to the way it works.
Yes, and for her to say,
suburban housewife, that is a phrase right out of the 1950s and 60s, or the 1960s.
Remember Valley of the Dolls? Look at this. Literally, this is Time magazine, the cover, June 20th, 1960. The suburban housewife, the prototypical suburban housewife to President Trump and probably a lot of other people is a white woman. But that is an outdated way of thinking. And it, quite frankly, is a dog whistle. Because of the race baiting and the fear mongering, using the words low-income housing would invade. You know what he means by that, right? He really means black Americans moving in. Don't pretend you're surprised by this. Like, oh my gosh, of course that's what he means. Why else would he say it? Right? And if you're not a black American and he says low income and you're a poor person in America, isn't that insulting as well? But why would he just single out poor people in America? Right? Isn't that part of his base, the unheard of people? So why is he saying it? Because he's talking about black people, the scary black people. And why would he cite Cory Booker, a black senator? Why Cory Booker? Why? Why not Elizabeth Warren? Why not Bernie Sanders? Or Sherrod Brown? Or Tim Kaine? Why not any of those? Come on. You know why not. The dogs aren't the only ones who are hearing that whistle. Trump continued that theme tonight at the White House, inferring that Kamala Harris is an angry black woman, especially during the Democratic primary races.
Look, he made a choice, he picked her. I watched her. I watched her poll numbers go boom, 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 down to almost nothing. And she left angry, she left mad. There was nobody more insulting to Biden than she was. She said horrible things about him.
Go down. Boom, boom, boom. Like the economy under President Trump. He's also called her nasty and mean. Donald Trump's record on dealing with racial issues in America is quite frankly appalling. He has shown hostility to the Black Lives Matter movement. But let's remember, this is the third anniversary of the March on Charlottesville by white supremacists. Jews will not replace us! Trump then forever staining his presidency when he said this.
You also had people that were very fine people on both sides. You had people in that group, excuse me, I saw the same pictures as you did.
Defending neo-Nazis and white supremacists. Okay? So, here's a contrast for you. I want you to listen to how Biden addresses race and the deadly violence in Charlottesville.
We have a racial justice crisis. Donald Trump seeks only to inflame it with his politics of racist rhetoric and appeals to division. It's also the third anniversary of that terrible day in Charlottesville. Remember what it felt like to see those neo-Nazis, close your eyes, and those Klansmen, white supremacists, coming out of fields, carrying lighted torches, faces contorted, bulging, veins, pouring into the streets of a historic American city. It was a wake-up call for all of us as a country.
And Harris is talking about hope in a country torn by racial injustice.
It's about who we are as a country. People of every age and color and creed who are finally declaring in one voice that yes, Black Lives Matter. All across this country, a whole new generation of children is growing up hearing the cries for justice and the chants of hope on which I was raised. Joe likes to say that character is on the ballot, and it's true. When he saw what happened in Charlottesville 3 years ago today, he knew we were in a battle for the soul of our nation.
Did you see the contrast there? I saw it, very fine people on both sides. defending neo-Nazis and white supremacists and white nationalists. Today, more than 1,000 Americans died from coronavirus. The 17th consecutive day the U.S. has averaged over 1,000 deaths from the disease. And since the outbreak of the virus, more than 165,000 Americans have died. It is a crisis taking our loved ones and our friends. But this president has denied its deadly impact on America since day one.
We have it under control. It's going to be just fine. We think we have it very well under control. We have very little problem in this country at this moment, 5. And those people are all recuperating successfully. By April, you know, in theory, when it gets a little warmer, it miraculously goes away.
The coronavirus, which is very well under control in our country.
We're going down, not up. We're going very substantially down, not up. When you have 15 people, and the 15 within a couple of days is going to be down to close to 0, that's a pretty good job we've done. We're doing a great job with it, and it will go away. Just stay calm. It will go away. Some of the doctors say it will wash through. It will flow through. Very accurate, I think you're going to find in a number of weeks. The FDA also gave emergency authorization for hydroxychloroquine. And I say it, what do you have to lose? I'll say it again. What do you have to lose? Take it. It will be wonderful. It'll be so beautiful. It'll be a gift from heaven if it works. I said, supposing you brought the light inside the body, which you can do either through the skin or in some other way. And I think you said you're going to test that too. Sounds interesting. Right, and then I see the disinfectant where it knocks it out in a minute, 1 minute. And is there a way we can do something like that by injection inside or almost a cleaning? Because you see it gets on the lungs.
All that's true, none of it taken out of context. That's what he said, his own words. Biden making it clear that he and Kamala Harris will tackle the other deadly virus, and that's COVID-19. They'll do it head on to get it under control and fix the economic devastation it has brought to the U.S.
We have a public health crisis while he's in court trying to do away with health care. With more than 5 million reported infections, 165,000 people dead and climbing as a consequence of COVID-19. And still, months later, no real leadership or plan from the President of the United States how to get this pandemic under control. No real help for the states and local governments trying to fill the vacuum of leadership from the White House. No real help for children and educators, for small businesses and frontline workers that they're ones holding our country together. Instead, he's issuing executive orders and making promises that in the end will defund the Social Security system while insisting that this virus will disappear. The Joe Biden and Kamala Harris administration will have a comprehensive plan to meet the challenge of COVID-19 and turn the corner on this pandemic. We just need a president and a vice president willing to lead and take responsibility. Not as this president says, it's not my fault.
When other countries are following the science, Trump pushed miracle cures he saw on Fox News. While other countries were flattening the curve, he said the virus would just, poof, go away. Quote, like a miracle.
83 days. That's not long. 83 days until Election Day, and already the contrasts between the two tickets at the U.S. as a U.S. battle, these twin viruses, COVID-19 and race, could not be any more striking.
A segregationist. She said that she agrees with his sexual harassment accusers, but it's a primary win last night that you say offers another warning sign. I want you to explain that.
Sure. The squad has been uniformly successful, Governor, in their primaries. Representative Omar was facing a very well-funded candidate, also a self-described progressive, who outraised her in the fourth quarter, and the second quarter, and she won by, I think, over 15 points. Representative Tlaib won handily, and AOC was renominated with about 3/4 of the vote. So it's not just what your guests are saying are the positions of the Democratic Party. That'll be debated, Governor, but it is incontrovertible that the far left has had great success getting reelected in House races and also electing a number of additional members to the Democratic delegation.
Doug, do the Democrats who are voting for these people, do they truly understand what they represent? Or are they just kind of following the celebrity status of these folks? That's a real question, I think, that the American people need to know. How much are these folks representing the heart and soul of today's Democratic Party?
You know, the people that are voting in Democratic primaries now, Governor, are not the same people you and I remember voting in Democratic primaries, the moderates. You're getting the activist progressive wing who, if they don't understand the precise ideas, get the basic ideology, and they do support to a much greater degree than the rest of the electorate defunding the police, Green New Deal, Medicare for all, policies that are out of step with the broader American electorate.
I want to also ask, 80 million gun owners in America, the Democrats have made it pretty clear they're going to go after people's guns, and 34% of the NRA members themselves are Democrats. How big a vulnerability does this create for Democrats who use that message and think it's a winner?
Well, the winning message is to be for background checks, for eliminating any possibility that anyone who has any sexual abuse in their background can get a gun, getting rid of the gun show loophole. I would strongly urge the Democrats to support those kind of policies and not support gun confiscation, which will not be a winner. Getting rid of assault weapons is one thing, but anything else is not going to be helpful politically.
That representation does matter, and that was referenced as well. So I think it was very important for the American people to see Kamala Harris, to see her, the poise, the control, the way she laid out the case for this ticket and where America needs to go and what it needs to do and how she and Joe Biden can get the nation there.
Renee, let me ask you about something you just said, a point you just made, that this was long overdue to see a black woman in this position. What does that fact that it is so overdue, what does that add to the weight of this experience for you today?
You know, what this is about is meeting the moment. You know, we're talking about systemic racism, we're talking about white supremacy, and you're talking about the direction of the Democratic Party. And let's not even kid ourselves. Black women have been the backbone of this party for a decade. They have been its heart and they've been its soul. And it's time for black women to assume the positions of power in this party. You know, they've hit that glass ceiling way too long. And so the fact that Kamala Harris has risen to the spot is incredibly important, because these are the issues we're talking about. We're talking about the doors that are closed to black people, the halls that are closed to black people. And we're talking about the ways that black women got Joe Biden where he is today. He's standing on that stage today because of what black women did back in February in all the primaries from South Carolina on. So this moment is absolutely overdue.
John Hyman, you tweeted just before the show, I saw the tweet you said today that this contest of sorts for vice president is now over and there's a winner, but there are two winners. How do you explain that?
Well, I think Lawrence T. and the beefsteaks, obviously the big winner here, the one who won the competition is Kamala Harris, and it was a real competition. I think a lot of people have observed in the last 24 hours something that I have believed on the basis of my reporting
for months, which was that Kamala Harris was the front runner from pillar to post. That doesn't mean that Joe Biden didn't take other considerations and other options seriously, like Susan Rice, who Rachel interviewed earlier. But I do think that she was the front runner from the beginning, and it would have taken something really problematic that they discovered about her in the vet, or someone really coming out of left field to surpass her. So she won. But I think the real winner here is Joe Biden. In the end, we know 100 years of political science tells us that people vote for the top of the ticket, not for the bottom of the ticket, which does not mean that the bottom of the ticket is not important. But Joe Biden, this is the most important decision Joe Biden has made, maybe in his political career, certainly in his presidential run. It's the most important decision he will make from now until the day he becomes inaugurated, if he's inaugurated. This is a choice that is not about winning. It's about a lot of things, but it's primarily not about winning a demographic or competing in a state or fundraising or any of that stuff. It's about a reflection of the candidate's values and priorities. And by choosing someone with whom he's manifestly this comfortable, someone who he clearly considers a governing partner, someone who met immediately. And I will point out that the fact that Republicans have attacked her, Donald Trump has attacked her, on a bunch of scores in the last 24 hours. The one thing they have not attacked her on is the most important thing. No one has assailed her on her qualifications and credibility to step into the Oval Office. No one. She has met the most important bar. And so I think Joe Biden is the other winner, and maybe the bigger winner in some sense, by making a selection that, and we could talk more about this as we go further into the block, it was executed flawlessly. And as we sit here tonight, the Democratic Party is rallied around this pick. The Republican Party is all over the place and has not found a clear line of attack against her. And Joe Biden right now is has gotten basically everything out of this pick. It's only 24 hours in here, right? But 24 hours in, everything has played out exactly in the optimal way that the Biden campaign and Joe Biden would have hoped it would. And Renee, it used to be that you'd be told if you were just elected to the Senate that it is too soon for you to be running for president in your first term as a senator, but Barack Obama did it. Kamala Harris followed exactly the same schedule, running for president on the same schedule as Barack Obama as a new senator. And here she is, as John says, with full credibility on that ticket.
Well, you have to remember, she has a long political career before she was a senator. She, had races to win as district attorney in San Francisco. She ran races to win attorney general in California. She understands the viscera of campaigning. I think that was a very important factor for Joe Biden. He didn't want someone out there who hadn't necessarily run a campaign. Also, because Kamala Harris had just run for president and just had her own campaign, she's been through a lot of it. She understands where the attacks are going to come from. It's going to be birtherism. It's going to be, is she black enough? But you can't get her on her qualifications. There will be questions about a prosecutorial record. There's no question about that. But you can't look at this woman and say she's simply unqualified to be in this position. And I think those are all some of the assets that she brings to the ticket, that she knows how to do this. She understands the attacks. She understands how to counter punch. That's an important thing in this campaign, because we've already seen, as John mentioned, in 24 hours, the Trump campaign doesn't have a lot to come with. They've called her nasty. They've called her angry. So they're going to play the typical racism and sexism playbook. It's all they have, and that's what they're going to harp on for the next days and the next months. They have nothing else, because you can't get her on her qualifications.
I have to say the best description I have ever read of the vetting process was John Heileman's reporting on the 2012 vetting process for the Republican nomination for vice president, which included John Heileman's reporting of how Chris Christie was immediately kicked out of the process because he could not pass the vet. I'm recommending that to our audience because we don't have time to talk about it tonight, John. John Heileman, Renee Graham, thank you both for starting us off tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Lawrence.
Thank you. And when we come back, Kamala Harris gave credit to the women who came before her, who paved the way for her to stand beside Joe Biden today as a candidate for Vice President of the United States. That is next with LaTosha Brown and Cecile Richards.